and I have known your like before, too. But you are mistaken if you think big eyes and strumpet smiles will win you Petyr. He is mine! They all tried to take him from me, my lord father, my husband, your mother, Catelyn most of all. She liked to kiss my Petyr too. Oh yes, she did.
Sansa retreated another step. My mother?
Yes, your mother. Your precious mother. Mine own sweet sister Catelyn. Don't you think to play the innocent with me, you vile little liar. All those years in Riverrun, she played with Petyr as if he were her little toy. She teased with him with smiles and soft words and wanton looks.
Big props to Girl Nettles on that scene, because if left to me and Dave trying to do Lysa's voice, it would have been more Monty Python screeching, "I'll give you my maidenhead." It would have been like that.
Hello. It's a long-awaited day. It's the Littlefinger stream, but we have Nettles and Tim here to make it a little bit less depressing and morbid. Hi. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I predict this will
hi,
be the
everyone,
best
Tim.
I'll do what I want.
Perfect.
I'm already predicting the best stream of 2024. It's happening right now.
That's why you've got your crown on there, your tiara.
Yep.
I'm working on a video, Nettles, called RLJ A Love Story. R plus L equals J A Love Story. Maynard James Plum, my manager, was joking before the stream. We should call this one Littlefinger and Littlefinger A Love Story.
Yeah, L plus L equals L.
Of course, Tim stroking his cat Damon in his lap. Let's say hi, Damon. Just want to make sure everyone knows what you're doing there, Tim, with your hands.
Show us your hands.
And welcome to the chat. And if you want to support the program, of course, you can hit up the PayPal link below. And if you're not subscribed to the Grey Waste Tim channel and the Girl Nettles channel, then what are you doing? Please make sure you are subscribed to my friends' channels here on this side. Well, there is a lot to unpack here. Let me say, I'll just take the deep breath. Oh, we've got a lot to go through here. It's many schemes of Littlefingers, a lot of psychology. This is going to be a Lysa stream as well. Obviously, you can't talk about Littlefinger without talking about Lysa, as well as Sansa, and a little bit of Cat, a little bit of Hoster, and a little bit of Robert's Rebellion. Petyr's just got his fingers and all kinds of things. Well, I thought we would begin with a little dramatic reading. And when I say dramatic reading, I do mean dramatic. We have read this chapter. It is the final chapter of A Storm of Swords, the Sansa Snow Castle / Lysa gets pushed out the Moon Door chapter. We've done a symbolism reading of this chapter before, and there's a ton of symbolism, so we would have broken it down and gone very slow and talked about the Ice Temple. What we're going to do now is we're focusing on the characters and the drama, so we are going to read straight through, and then we will break it down, because this is pretty much all the masks and covers are dropping here. First, we have Lysa confessing to Sansa certain things, and then blabbing some more stuff, and Petyr's talking, and Sansa's not really processing it because she's in a lot of shock, but she might eventually put together some of the stuff that's being said in this room. So this kind of is when the reader just goes, oh, what's been going on up here in the Eyrie this whole time? Wow. With the plotting, this is when we first realize, really, that the letter sent to the Starks at the beginning of the whole story was a lie and a plot. Let's just get into it. So I'm going to do Sansa, and Nettles will do Lysa, and Tim will do Littlefinger. And Tim, you will also do Marillion. But Marillion's really just throwing in a couple hey naughty naughties in the background. The scene where Petyr and Sansa kiss, and Sweet Robin has the fit. It's because this doll got torn, and Sansa thinks she's in trouble because of Sweet Robin's fit, but actually she's going to be in trouble because of the kissing. Right. And so Sansa is musing on her potential confrontation with Lysa here as this narrative begins. She's in her room right after this scene. Sansa would have welcomed banishment. The Gates of the Moon was much larger than the Eyrie, and livelier as well. Lord Nestor Royce seemed gruff and stern, but his daughter Miranda, whom we've met since this chapter, of course, kept his castle for him, and everyone said how frolicsome she was. Even Sansa's supposed bastardy might not count too much against her below, because of course Sansa is Elaine Stone right now. One of King Robert's baseborn daughters was in service to Lord Nestor, that's Maya Stone, and she and the Lady Miranda were said to be fast friends, as close as sisters. I will tell my aunt that I don't want to marry Robert. Not even the High Septon himself could declare a woman married if she refused to say the vows. She wasn't a beggar, no matter what her aunt said. She was 13, a woman flowered and wed, the heir to Winterfell. Sansa felt sorry for her little cousin sometimes, but she could not imagine ever wanting to be his wife. I would sooner be married to Tyrion again. If Lady Lysa knew that, surely she'd send her away. Away from Robert's pouts and shakes and runny eyes, away from Marillion's lingering looks, away from Petyr's kisses. I will tell her. I will. It was late that afternoon when Lady Lysa summoned her. Sansa had been marshalling her courage all day, but no sooner did Marillion appear at her door than all her doubts returned.
Lady Lysa requires your presence in the High Hall. The
singer's eyes undressed her as she spoke, but she was used to that. Marillion was comely, there was no denying it, boyish and slender, with smooth skin, sandy hair, and a charming smile, but he had made himself well hated in the Vale by everyone but her aunt and little Lord Robert. To hear the servants talk, Sansa was not the first maid to suffer his advances, and the others had not had Lothar Brune to defend them. But Lady Lysa would hear no complaints against him. Since coming to the Eyrie, the singer had become her favorite. She sang Lord Robert to sleep every night and tweaked the noses of Lady Lysa's suitors with verses that made mock of their foibles. Her aunt had showered him with gold and gifts, costly clothes, a gold arm ring, a belt studded with moonstones, a fine horse. She had even given him her late husband's favorite falcon. It all served to make Marillion unfailingly courteous in Lady Lysa's presence and unfailingly arrogant outside it. Thank you, Sansa told him stiffly. I know the way.
He would not leave. My lady said to bring you.
Bring me? She did not like the sound of that. Are you a guardsman now? Littlefinger had dismissed the Erie's captain of guards and put Sir Lothar Brune in his place.
Do you require guarding? Marillion said lightly. I am composing a new song you should know. A song so sweet and sad, it will melt even your frozen heart. The Roadside Rose, I mean to call it, about a baseborn girl so beautiful, she bewitched every man who laid eyes upon her.
I am a Stark of Winterfell, she longed to tell him. Instead, she nodded and let him escort her down the tower steps and along a bridge. The High Hall had been closed as long as she'd been at the Eyrie. Sansa wondered why her aunt had opened it. Normally, she preferred the comfort of her solar or the cozy warmth of Lord Arryn's audience chamber with its view of the waterfall.
2 guards in sky blue cloaks flanked the carved wooden doors of the High Hall, spears in hand. No one is to enter so long as Elaine is with Lady Lysa, Marillion told them.
Aye. Men let them pass, then cross their spears. Don't laugh at my guardsman voice, Nettles. Marillion swung the doors shut and barred them with a third spear. I'm kidding, you can laugh. Longer and thicker than those the guards had borne. Sansa felt a prickle of unease. Why do you do that?
My lady awaits you.
She looked about uncertainly. Lady Lysa sat on the dais in a high-backed chair of carved weirwood, alone. To her right was a second chair, taller than her own, with a stack of blue cushions piled on the seat, but Lord Robert was not in it. Sansa hoped he'd recovered. Marillion was not like to tell her, though.
Sansa walked down the blue silk carpet between rows of fluted pillars slim as lances. The floors and walls of the high hall were made of milk-white marble, veined with blue. Shafts of pale daylight slanted down through the narrow arched windows along the eastern wall. Between the windows were torches mounted in high iron sconces, but none of them was lit. Her footsteps fell softly on the carpet. Outside, the wind blew, cold and lonely. Amidst so much white marble, even the sunlight looked chilly somehow, though not half so chilly as her aunt. Lady Lysa had dressed in a gown of cream-colored velvet and a necklace of sapphires and moonstones. Her auburn hair had been done up in a thick braid and fell across one shoulder. She sat in the high seat watching her niece approach, her face red and puffy beneath the paint and powder. On the wall behind her hung a huge banner, the moon and falcon of House Arryn, in cream and blue.
Sansa stopped before the dais and curtsied, and so your lines will be in yellow now, Nettles.
Cool.
My lady, you sent for me. She could still hear the sound of the wind and the soft chords Marillion was playing at the foot of the hall.
I saw what you did,
The Lady Lysa said. Sansa smoothed down the folds of her skirt. I trust Lord Robert is better. I never meant to rip his doll. He was smashing my snow castle. I only...
Will you play the coy deceiver with me?
Her aunt said.
I was not speaking of Robert's doll. I saw you kissing him.
The high hall seemed to grow a little colder. The walls and floor and columns might have turned to ice. He kissed me.
Lysa's nostrils flared. And why would he do that? He has a wife who loves him, a woman grown, not a little girl. He has no need for the likes of you. Confess, child, you threw yourself at him. That was the way of it.
Sansa took a step backward. That's not true.
Where are you going? Are you afraid? Such wanton behavior must be punished. But I will not be hard on you. We keep a whipping boy for Robert, as is the custom in the free cities. His health is too delicate for him to bear the rod himself. I shall find some common girl to take your whipping. But first, you must own up to what you've done. I cannot abide a liar, Elaine.
I was building a snow castle, Sansa sned. Lord Petyr was helping me, and then he kissed me. That's what you saw.
Have you no honor? Or do you take me for a fool? You do, don't you? You take me for a fool. Yes, I can see that now. I am not a fool. You think you can have any man you want because you're young and beautiful. Don't think I haven't seen the looks you give Marillion. I know everything that happens in the Eyrie, little lady. And I have known your like before, too. But you are mistaken if you think big eyes and strumpet smiles will win you Petyr. He is mine! They all tried to take him from me. My lord father, my husband, your mother, Catelyn most of all. She liked to kiss my Petyr, too. Oh, yes, she did.
Sansa retreated another step. My mother?
Yes, your mother. Your precious mother. Mine own sweet sister Catelyn. Don't you think to play the innocent with me, you vile little liar. All those years in Riverrun, she played with Petyr as if he were her little toy. She teased with him with smiles and soft words and wanton looks, and made his nights a torment.
No, my mother is dead, she wanted to shriek. She was your own sister and she's dead. She wouldn't.
How would you know? Were you there? Lysa descended from the high seat, her skirt swirling. Did you come with Lord Bracken and Lord Blackwood the time they visited to lay their feud before my father? Lord Bracken Singer played for us, and Catelyn danced 6 dances with Petyr that night. 6! I counted. When the lords began to argue, my father took them up to the audience chamber, so there was no one to stop us drinking. Edmure got drunk, young as he was, and Petyr tried to kiss your mother, only she pushed him away. She laughed at him. He looked so wounded. I thought my heart would burst. And afterward, he drank until he passed out at the table. Uncle Brynden carried him to bed before my father could find him like that. But you remember none of it, do you? She looked down angrily. Do you?
She drunk or mad? I was not born, my lady.
You were not born, but I was. So do not presume to tell what is true. I know what is true. You kissed him.
He kissed me, Sansa insisted again. I never wanted.
Be quiet! I haven't given you leave to speak. You enticed him just as your mother did the night in Riverrun, with her smiles and her dancing. You think I could forget? That was the night I stole up to his bed to give him comfort. I bled, but it was the sweetest hurt. He told me he loved me then, but he called me Cat. Just before he fell back to sleep, even so. I stayed with him until the sky began to lighten. Your mother did not deserve him. She would not even give him her favor to wear when he fought Brandon Stark. I would have given him my favor I gave him everything. He is mine now. Not Catelyn's and not yours.
All of Sansa's resolve had withered in the face of her aunt's onslaught. Lysa Arryn was frightening her as much as Queen Cersei ever had. "He's yours, my lady," she said, trying to sound meek and contrite. "May I have your leave to go?"
You may not. Her aunt's breath smelled of wine. If you were anyone else, I would banish you. Send you down to Lord Nestor's at the gates of the moon, or back to the Fingers. How would you like to spend your life on that bleak shore, surrounded by slatterns and sheep pellets? That was what my father meant for Petyr. Everyone thought it was because of that stupid duel with Brandon Stark. But that wasn't so. Father said I ought to thank the gods that so great a lord as Jon Arryn was willing to take me soiled. But I knew it was only for the swords. I had to marry Jon, or my father would have turned me out as he did his brother. But it was Petyr I was meant for. I'm telling you all this so you will understand how much we love each other. How long we have suffered and dreamed of one another. We made a baby together, a precious little baby. Lysa put her hands flat against her belly, as if the child was still in there. When they stole him from me, I made a promise to myself that I would never let it happen again. Jon wished to send my sweet Robert to Dragonstone, and that sot of a king would have given him to Cersei Lannister. But I never let them. No more than I'll let you steal my Petyr Littlefinger. Do you hear me? Elaine, or Sansa, or whatever you call yourself. Do you hear what I'm telling you?
"Yes, I swear. I will never kiss him again or entice him." Sansa thought that was what her aunt wanted to hear.
So you admit it now. It was you. Just as I thought. You are a wanton as your mother. Come with me now. This is something I want to show you.
"You're hurting me," Sansa squirmed. "Please, Aunt Lysa, I haven't done anything, I swear."
Her aunt ignored her protests. "Marillion!" she shouted. "I need you. Marillion, I need you."
The singer had remained discreetly in the rear of the hall, but at Lady Arryn's shout he came at once. "My lady."
Play us a song. Play the false and the fair.
Marillion's fingers brushed the strings. "The Lord, he came a-riding upon a rainy day. Hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, hey."
Lady Lysa pulled at Sansa's arm. It was either walk or be dragged, so she chose to walk, halfway down the hall and between a pair of pillars, to a white weirwood door set in the marble wall. The door was firmly closed, with 3 heavy bronze bars to hold it in place. But Sansa could hear the wind outside worrying at its edges. When she saw the crescent moon carved in the wood, she planted her feet. "The moon door," she tried to yank free. "Why are you showing me the moon door?"
You speak like a mouse now. But you were bold enough in the garden, weren't you? You were so bold enough in the snow.
"The lady sat a-sewing upon a rainy day. Hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, hey."
Open the door, Lysa commanded. Open it. I say you will do it, or I'll send for my guards. She shoved Sansa forward. Your mother was brave, at least.
"If I do as she says, she will let me go." Sansa grabbed one of the bronze bars, yanked it loose, and tossed it down. The second bar clattered to the marble, then the third. She had barely touched the latch when the heavy wooden door flew inward and slammed back against the wall with a bang. Snow had piled up around the frame, and it all came blowing in at them, borne on a blast of cold air that left Sansa shivering. She tried to step backward, but her aunt was behind her. Lysa seized her by the wrist and put her other hand between her shoulder blades, propelling her forcefully toward the open door. Beyond was white sky, falling snow, and nothing else.
Look down! Look down!
She tried to wrench free, but her aunt's fingers were digging into her arms like claws. Lysa gave her another shove, and Sansa shrieked. Her left foot broke through a crust of ice and knocked it loose. There was nothing in front of her but empty air and a way castle 600 feet below, clinging to the side of the mountain. "Don't!" Sansa screamed. "You're scaring me!" Behind her, Marillion was still playing his wood harp and singing.
"Hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, nonny, hey, nonny, hey."
Do you still want my leave to go?
"No!" Sansa planted her feet and tried to squirm backward, but her aunt did not budge. "Not this way! Please!" She put a hand up, her fingers scrabbling at the door frame, but she could not get a grip. Scrabbling, like the game Scrabble. and her feet were sliding on the wet marble floor. Lady Lysa pressed her forward inexorably. Her aunt outweighed her by 3 stone. And a stone is 20 pounds, so we're talking 60 pounds here.
The lady lay a-kissing upon the mound of hay, Marillion was singing. Sansa twisted sideways, hysterical with fear, and one foot slipped out over the void. She screamed, "Hey, nanny, nanny, hey, nanny, nanny, hey, nanny, hey."
The wind flapped her skirts up and bit at her bare legs with cold teeth. This randy wind lifting that skirt. She could feel snowflakes melting on her cheeks. There's no symbolism here, I swear. Sansa flailed, found Lysa's thick auburn braid, and clutched it tight.
My hair! Let go of my hair!
She was shaking, sobbing. They teetered on the edge. Far off, she heard the guards pounding on the door with their spears, demanding to be let in. Marillion broke off his song.
"Lysa, what's the meaning of this?" The shout cut through the sobs and heavy breathing. Footsteps echoed down the high hall. "Get back from there, Lysa. What are you doing?" The guards were still beating at the door. Littlefinger had come in the back way, through the Lord's entrance behind the dais. As Lysa turned, her grip loosened enough for Sansa to rip free. She stumbled to her knees where Petry Baelish saw her. He stopped suddenly. "Elaine, what is the trouble here?"
Her? Lady Lysa grabbed a handful of Sansa's hair. She's the trouble. She kissed you.
Tell her, Sansa begged. Tell her we were just building a castle.
Be quiet! Her aunt screamed. I never gave you leave to speak. No one cares about your castle.
"She is a child, Lysa. Cat's daughter. What did you think you were doing?"
I was going to marry her to Robert. She has no gratitude, no decency. You are not hers to kiss, not hers. I was teaching her a lesson, that was all.
"I see." He stroked his chin. "I think she understands now. Isn't that so, Elaine?"
Yes, sobbed Sansa. I understand.
I don't want her here. Her aunt's eyes were shiny with tears. Why did you bring her to the Vale, Petyr? This isn't her place. She doesn't belong here.
"We'll send her away then. Back to King's Landing, if you like." He took a step toward them. "Let her up now. Let her away from the door."
No! Lysa gave Sansa's head another wrench. Snow eddied around them, making their skirts snap noisily. You can't want her. You can't! She's a stupid, empty-headed little girl. She doesn't love you the way I have. I've always loved you. I've proved it, haven't I? Tears ran down her aunt's puffy red face. I gave you my maiden's gift. I would have given you a son, too. But they murdered him with moon tea, with tansy and mint and wormwood, a spoon of honey and a drop of pennyrail. It wasn't me. I never knew. I only drank what father gave me.
"That's past and done, Lysa. Lord Hoster's dead, and his old maester as well." Littlefinger moved closer. "Have you been at the wine again? You ought not to talk so much. We don't want Elaine to know more than she should, do we? Or Marillion."
Lady Lysa ignored that. Cat never gave you anything. It was me who got you your first post, who made John bring you to court so we could be close to one another. You promised me you would never forget that.
"Nor have I. We're together, just as you always wanted, just as we always planned. Just let go of Sansa's hair."
I won't! I saw you kissing in the snow. She's just like her mother. Catelyn kissed you in the Godswood, but she never meant it. She never wanted you. Why did you love her best? It was me. It was always me.
"I know, love." He took another step. "And I am here. All you need to do is take my hand. Come on." He held it out to her. "There's no cause for all these tears."
Tears. No need for tears. But that's not what you said in King's Landing. You told me to put the tears in John's wine, and I did. For Robert and for us. I wrote Catelyn and told her the Lannisters had killed my lord husband, just as you said. That was so clever. You were always so clever. I told father that. I said, Peter's so clever. He'll rise high, he will. He's sweet and gentle, and I have his little baby in my belly. Why did you kiss her? Why? We're together now. We're together after so long, so very long. Why would you want to kiss her?
Lysa, after all the storms we've suffered, you should trust me better. I swear, I shall never leave your side again, for as long as we both shall live.
Truly? She asked, weeping. Oh, truly.
Truly. Hand the girl, and come give me a kiss.
Lysa threw herself in Littlefinger's arms, sobbing. As they hugged, Sansa crawled from the moon door on hands and knees and wrapped her arms around the nearest pillar. She could feel her heart pounding. There was snow in her hair, and her right shoe was missing. It must have fallen. She shuddered and hugged the pillar tighter. Littlefinger let Lysa sob against his chest and for a moment, then put his hands on her arms and kissed her lightly.
My sweet, silly, jealous wife, I've only loved one woman, I promise you.
Only one? Oh, Petyr. Do you swear it? Only one.
Only Cat. He gave her a sharp shove.
Lysa stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the wet marble, and then she was gone. She never screamed. For the longest time, there was no sound but the wind. Marillion gasped.
You. The guards were shouting outside the door, pounding with the butts of their heavy spears. Lord Petyr pulled Sansa to her feet. You're not hurt. When she shook her head, he said, run. Let my gods in then. Quick now. There's no time to lose. The singer has killed my lady wife.
Dang, Marillion. How could you?
How could you, Marillion?
We all
Damn.
saw it.
Lysa gave you a chance. Brought you
Well,
all the way
okay,
through.
so everyone, if you're not subscribed to the Girl Nettles channel, you owe it to her for that entertainment that she's just provided to you. That's, yeah, so just exactly. Bravo, everyone. Just applauding the whole time, by the way. Loving that. So this, yeah, as I was thinking about the stream, it began as like, oh, you know, we should have Girl Nettles on just to add a little extra spice and the female perspective, obviously, since we're talking about some pretty intense stuff. And then it dawned on me, I was like, oh, I should start by reading the scene and let Nettles do the Lysa confession lines. So I knew you would kill it. And yeah, that was amazing. Thank you very much. Appreciate both you guys. And that really was quite the series of monologues by Lysa. This is the ending to the book. You can end a book. It doesn't have to be a big battle. It can be a scene like this that's so riveting that you put it down and you're just like, oh my God.
And the interesting is those monologues is she's in 3 points of time. She's at River Run as a kid, she's in King's Landing, and she's also at the Vale. And in her mind, they're all the same. That's weird.
Just yesterday on Tim's channel, in fact, we were talking about how George does a lot of flashback, and certain times he dials it up to where it's almost psychedelic, to where the different time periods are being overlaid in the narrative. And he dials that up when a character is like less tethered to reality in some way. And here Lysa is obviously sort of becoming unhinged. She's having a breakdown, if you will. And yeah, you're right to point that out. It really is psychedelic the way that she is weaving it all together. And that's part of the reason why Sansa maybe isn't understanding everything she's hearing, right?
Yes. Only on the third reread will you understand everything that's happened, basically. That's how it was for me.
Right. Like if you're Sansa, I mean, you saw how it was. She hugged the pillar and then she saw her shoe was missing and then she hugged it tighter. She's just like, oh my God. She's shaking. She's definitely not writing down notes here about these schemes. She will eventually put some of this together and she definitely understands some of it. But the tears in Jon's wine, like, I don't know if Sansa knows about the letter that Ned and Kat got from Lysa in Winterfell. Probably not.
No, how would she?
I don't think she would, yeah.
It's not like she ever met her Catelyn when Catelyn was in King's Landing. Ned would have had to tell her, and I don't see him doing that.
I want to kind of back up and go back to the origin story with Lysa and Petyr and start there. And we will get to the future plots involving Sansa as well. But a lot just fell out. Really, a lot did. Tim, do you have some meta thoughts on just all of that we just read before I move on?
Yeah, first again, big props to Girl Nettles on that scene, because if left to me and Dave trying to do Lysa's voice, it would have been more Monty Python screeching, "I'll give you my maidenhead." It would have been like that.
Put that on TikTok. Somebody. Oh, God.
Because so much is revealed here. And it's like the word plot dump gets thrown, but it's like when you want to do a plot dump right and get a whole lot of information out in one go, this is the way to do it. Not an exposition drop. Like, weave it into the story, craft it in to give it all the information that the reader needs to have, but with so much oomph and so much impact.
Yeah. And George, I was thinking about this. George does love his confessions. Who else gives some really good confessions? Like Varys to Kevin when he dies.
We do have we have a lot, because it's kind of a way to move the exposition along and to let us know things that we would never know.
Oh, Jaime. That's who it was. Jaime has two. He confesses to Brienne about killing Aerys, and then he also confesses. What was the other confession that Jaime does? Killing the Mad King.
He kind of confesses to Catelyn that I did push Bran.
No, well, that one, but also just when he tells Catelyn about Brandon and Aerys' death. Mm-hmm. It's this gnarly secret that he sort of uses as a weapon. He's like, "Oh, what did Ned tell you about that?" He's like, "Well, let me tell you the real story." And it's just like, oh my God, it's so much worse than we thought.
He also reveals a lot to Ilyn Payne, since he knows that Ilyn Payne can't report it back. And then that's when Ilyn Payne gives him that tongue rattle in response.
The Hound does some confession. Tyrion with the false confession to Jaime about Joffrey. Yeah, so it's definitely a tool that George uses well, and it's very dramatic if done right, clearly. That was probably the best one, though, that we just did. And again, we have the singing in the background to sort of like make noise so people can't listen.
Hey, Nani, Nani, hey, Nani, Nani.
A barrel covered with hair. Oh, I guess we'll have to kill Joffrey then. It's a shame. Tut, tut.
Yeah, well, it looks like she's about to kill her niece, so I guess I'm just going to keep singing, "Hey, Nani, Nani."
This is quite the concoction that she is given here. Moon tea, tansy, mint, wormwood, spoon of honey, and a drop of pennyroyal tea. I was reading up on this a little bit, and we're going to go over the whole timeline, but it does seem, a lot of people have speculated, that Lysa would have hid her pregnancy for a while. Moon tea is usually used as a morning after pill.
Yeah.
Here it was used as an abortifacient, potentially weeks and weeks after pregnancy, after the embryo is implanted and stuff. And so they would have needed a stronger dose. And this is probably why it seems to have caused Lysa damage to where she has so many subsequent miscarriages and there was so much blood. And we're also going to read the scene on Hoster's deathbed in a second where Kat is sort of putting this together. And maybe that's a good place to go next. But this is the center of Lysa's trauma. And so, yeah, this would have been a stronger dose than normal. That's why it caused so much damage, and because it potentially could have been, like I said, weeks and weeks. And it was done specifically as part of the Southround Ambition's plot to create this alliance between the houses to overthrow King Aerys. So there was a big political need to do this. It has to do with Brandon and everything. So we'll untangle that. But yeah, I just wanted to, since you mentioned the wormwood is a poisonous substance too, is it not, Tim?
Yeah, so Lysa having such a bad reaction to it could mean that there was too much wormwood in it. For those who don't know, yesterday Dave came on my channel and we did the chapter read of Tyrion 1 and A Dance with Dragons. There's a scene where Tyrion is down in Illyrio's wine cellar and he finds wine from a shy, and we started talking about like, well, what could grow out in a shy that they could be making wine from? And I brought up wormwood and absinthe. Wormwood in small doses can be used in brewing. You can make a tea from it, and it's used in absinthe. But in large doses, wormwood becomes a poison. It causes seizures and kidney failure and things like that. And so, yeah, too much wormwood in the tea would have this kind of effect on Lysa.
Well, tansy is also an abortifacient, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It looks like it didn't work, because this happens to some women. Like they could take the morning after pill and the baby's still there. And so if this happened in medieval times, it's like, okay, first they gave her moon tea, after a week she's still pregnant. Okay, so then they gave her tansy, then a week later mint. And so that's also prolonging the psychological effects of it on her. That's what it seems like. You wouldn't give a person all of this all at once. You'd only give it when it didn't work. That's what
are you saying exactly?
that each of these things that she lists were given to her over time. Like, okay, when Hoster first found out they gave her moon tea, but it didn't work. She was still pregnant. And then
where did you get that idea?
Because of the amount that they list, that it's moon tea and tansy and mint and wormwood and then pennyroyal.
Well, I'm saying that they would have mixed up something stronger than normal because she would have been several weeks along. Right.
Right. But still, it seems like it was prolonged.
Well, whatever it was, it definitely seems that we're supposed to understand that she has so many miscarriages because of this. So it was both a physical and a psychological trauma as well. So this is definitely kind of where it starts. And you'll also notice later Petyr, who's talked to her about this a bunch, no doubt, he says, Hoster's dead and the Maester is long dead. Like, she hates the Maester as much as, like, her dad for doing this. So, it's specifically the stuff that they brewed up. So whether it was multiple doses or one really strong dose, like, this is crossing the line between doing healthcare and because she didn't want the abortion. So that's really more like murder, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the most invasive that you could get on someone.
It's important to realize that this is kind of a monstrous act by Hoster, but at the same time, it's also very much in keeping with what most lords would do. And it is very much reflective of the badness of the society and the Game of Thrones and the way it makes all the children pawns. Maynard James Plum, who's just a couple years older than me, mentioned to me that as recently as in the 70s, it was basically standard procedure, because access to abortion was not widespread or safe or any of that or legal, that it was standard procedure if a middle class or above woman would get pregnant and she was young, what the parents would do is they would send her to a retreat center where she would go out and wait out her pregnancy, have the child, give it up. She'd come back home and the family would be like, oh, they were visiting relatives, blah, blah, blah. So that her honor wasn't besmirched and people wouldn't think she was a hoe and that she could still get a marriage and the family's not disgraced. So you basically have grandparents giving up their own grandchildren instead of staying on their honor. This was in the 70s.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. So
Oh, I know it because my family went through it.
There you go.
The good old Catholic cover-up.
Basically, it's just one of those things where it's definitely reflective on Hoster as an individual, but it's even more important to realize that this is the societal gears. The reason why she's looked at as soiled. This is all the patriarchy hashtag.
And also, we're not giving birth for fun. We're not giving birth because we're in love. We're giving birth to carry on a specific bloodline. And that bloodline pays for it by way of dowry and marriage. You're supposed to give a son to John Aaron. That's what a woman is supposed to do. So any other son is null and void.
Well, so the sequence of this is really interesting because she gets pregnant with Petyr's kid and then she's given this moon tea. It seems because Hoster needs to wed her to John Aaron. She needs to be available for this marriage and Hoster finds out she's pregnant. It's all train wrecking right on top of one another. When she's getting married to John Aaron, she's still in the wake of this loss, heavily.
Lysa's kind of stupid too because the best thing to do is to keep this under wraps and pass the baby off as John Aaron's. Why did she go blabbing? She's just inexperienced in the ways of the world. Poor Lysa.
Yeah, she may have been showing, but she's certainly not plotting anything like that at this point.
Yeah, not politically savvy.
Okay, so the first thing is that Kat and Lysa's mother, Anissa, died when they were pretty young. And so there's a quote here. Brendan is talking to Kat, and Brendan says about about Hoster, rather. He misses her still. You have her face. I can see it in your cheekbones and your jaw. And then Catelyn says, you remember more of her than I do. It's been a long time. So Catelyn is several years older than Lysa, and Catelyn barely remembers her mom. So Lysa basically grew up without a mother. And Hoster, her father, has been traumatized, of course, by the death of his wife. She died trying to give him a son, and the boy died too. So it was a multiple tragedy, and it changed Hoster. And it said, Lady Minissa Tully had died in childbed trying to give Lord Hoster a second son. The baby had perished with her, and afterwards some of the life had gone out of father. She was always so calm, Catelyn thought, remembering her mother's soft hands, her warm smile. So that's what Catelyn remembers, just like the smile, the touch, the feeling, not a whole lot else. And then she says, if she had lived, how different our lives might have been. So that's kind of the start of it. Lysa is looking for love and acceptance that she did not get. I think starts to explain some of her psychology with Petyr and the obsessive way she's pursuing him and the way that she is like okay with Petyr calls her cat, like we just read. So you could tell like, her self-esteem is low. She's just wants to get her man. She's okay with fooling him to do it. That's a certain kind of obsession where you're trying to get somebody as a prize. She's not really concerned with whether he loves her back, you know?
Yeah.
So thoughts?
It's a sad situation to know that your love is unrequited, but you do all of these mind games and jump through hurdles to try and make yourself feel like, no, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. He called me by my sister's name, but that's okay. I still love him. It's just like, it's heart-wrenching, but you still feel like this is the best that you're going to get. And you want so badly to make it real.
Yeah, I could name probably like 10 girls who are exactly like Lysa, who will do the craziest mental gymnastics to convince themselves that this man loves them. And that's the only way that this works, is that they honestly believe that this man loves them. It doesn't matter that he has 3 other baby mamas. It doesn't matter that he cheats on you. It doesn't matter that he borrows your car and all that stuff. Like, they don't see it. And they could see it for other people. Like, they'll be the first ones to be like, oh, girl, you need to leave that man. He's not good for you. So they could see it in other people. But when it comes to themselves, their brain does some covering up, where it's like, it's the rose-colored glasses, this veil over their eyes, where they're like, oh, he called me cat, but it's because he was on the milk of the poppy and he had just fought the duel for cat. So that's why his subconscious was thinking about her. So he just said it, but he doesn't really love her. He doesn't know what he was saying. He also said grass. He also said cow. She's doing these mental gymnastics. I don't know why I thought of grass and cow, but
no, that's it. No, that's it. You nailed it.
To make herself believe that they're meant to be, because if she believes that Petyr really loves her, that gives her value. It gives her value, like, the first man that ever met me loves me because I'm so good, I'm so pure. That's how I feel like some of the girls who hold on to their high school sweethearts, it's like, why don't you want to date someone that you met as an adult? Why are you clinging to the fact that we've been together since high school? It's because they've known you pre-puberty or in this pure form, and they still love you. They saw you with all your flaws.
So there's a little bit of arrested development here on Lysa's part, and a little bit with Petyr too. They're both kind of frozen in time from this moment. Petyr has been chewing on this moment when Brandon made him feel small.
Yeah.
For like 20 years. And same thing with Lysa. They took her baby and they wouldn't let her marry Petyr, and they shipped her off to marry Jon for swords. And that is what she is talking about and chewing on in the moment that she is breaking down and speaking like the stuff that she's the most upset about. We have to observe that Petyr has been exploiting that. Petyr understands that she is torn up about the loss of their baby, and he's been promising, oh, we'll make another son, we'll eventually be together, and basically using that trauma and the hope of fixing it to string her along this whole time. Yeah. So that is where we begin to observe the darkness of Petyr. It's one thing for him to use the fact that Lysa has a crush on him to get offices and get promotions. That's like hitting up your ex-girlfriend and being like, hey, your dad runs the company. You think maybe give him my resume? Okay. And we'll talk about Petyr's skill in banking and his tenfold increases in a minute. Yeah. I just want to observe that Petyr is able to exploit this weakness in Lysa. Tim, your thoughts?
Chat was asking, how could Sweet Robin be Littlefinger's son? And I think it's quite possible, because with Jon Arryn spending extended amount of times at King's Landing and Lysa refusing to go and stay at the Eyrie, there's plenty of opportunity for Littlefinger to come down from the veil, or to come down from the fingers, or for her to go up there. And the way Lysa acts, it'd be like Littlefinger is shooting her that 4 a.m. text, like, hey, you up? And she jumps on. Like, that's really what's happening here. Also,
Jon Arryn swimmers, I don't think they're swimming that fast. They're just not good swimmers.
He's pretty old. Yeah. and was not able to, he was married previously, right?
3 times.
Okay, I thought so, yeah. His
and
swimmers are not swimming, they're not.
So even different women, you can't say it's the woman when it's 3 different women that can't give him kids.
Well, yeah, the mockingbird is from a family of birds who do that cuckoo thing. So it would kind of make sense if Petyr's doing that. He has snuck into the eyrie, the bird's nest, and planted his kid in the nest. It seems like that's what's happening, which just makes it darker that Petyr's probably planning to kill Sweet Robin. But that's Petry Baelish for you.
I also want to say that that little blurb we read was pretty much about Lysa growing up without a mother, the mental effects of that. Every time something good or bad happens, you're like, oh, if my mom was here, they wouldn't have given me Tansy tea. If my mom was here, she would have let me keep the baby, even though it's not true. But because that person's dead, you could use your imagination to think of what they would say, and that becomes like your mother figure. So Lysa has no hold on reality because her mother figure is in her head doing whatever she says that she would do. So it's like enabling her too.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention was when Sansa grabbed Lysa's braid, she said, my hair, not let go of my hair, makes you think of Cat.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, my hair, Ned loves my hair. That's the last thing she says before she dies. So it's a very interesting parallel there between those death scenes. Okay, so let's read this. This is the other really good, meaty quote, and this is from Storm also. I'll do the narrator. I didn't highlight this, I don't think, but I will do the narrator. You will do Catelyn, and you can do Dying Hoster, Tim, which should essentially be used to Osgrey on a bad day, I think. Catelyn is grounded right now for letting the Kingslayer go, but she's being confined to her father's solar so she can spend time with her dear old dad, who's on his last legs. That's the setup. So, gathering up his potions, Vyman, that's Maester Vyman, made a hurried exit, and once again Catelyn was left alone with her father. And so, the milk of the poppy had done its work, and Lord Hoster had sunk into a heavy sleep. A thin line of spittle ran down one corner of his open mouth to dampen his pillow. How charming, it's the little things. Catelyn took a square of linen and wiped it away gently. When she touched him, Lord Hoster moaned.
Forgive me, he said, so softly she could scarcely hear the words. Tansy, blood, the blood, gods be kind.
His words disturbed her more than she could say, though she could make no sense of them. Blood, she thought. Must it all come back to blood? Father, who was the woman? And what did you do to her that needs so much forgiveness?
That night Catelyn slept fitfully, haunted by formless dreams of her children, the lost and the dead. Well before the break of day, she woke with her father's words echoing in her ears.
Sweet babes and true born, why would he say that? Unless, could he have fathered a bastard on this woman Tansy? She could not believe it. Her brother Edmure, yes. It would not have surprised her to learn that Edmure had a dozen natural children, but not her father, not Lord Hoster Tully, never.
So there's 2 parts to this scene. There's him babbling, and then there's her putting it together. And I think I skipped the babbling part because it's the part where she's putting it together that has the information. So it's just a few things he says here.
He's probably saying the same things, right?
Yeah, mostly it's just what he said. Forgive me the blood, oh please, Tansy. And then he says, dead, you'll have others, sweet babes and trueborn. So that's obviously something he was saying to Lysa. And just remember about all the remarking on how much blood. That's our clue that like this was a bad thing that happened. Yeah. And then see, be a good wife and the gods will bless you. Sons, trueborn sons. So Hoster's trying to lie to himself and be like, oh no, it's okay. You'll have other children in the future, even though this horrible thing is happening right now. That's pretty much it. So let's go back to where we were, where Kat's putting it together.
Could Tansy be some pet name he called Lysa, the way he called me Cat? Lord Hoster had mistaken her for her sister before. You'll have others, he said. Sweet babes and true born. Lysa had miscarried 5 times, twice in the Eyrie, thrice at King's Landing, but never at Riverrun, where Lord Hoster would have been at hand to comfort her. Never unless she was with child that first time. She and her sister had been married on the same day, and left in their father's care when their new husbands had ridden off to rejoin Robert's rebellion. Afterward, when their moonblood did not come at the accustomed time, Lysa had gushed happily of the son she was certain they carried. Your son will be heir to Winterfell and mine to the Eyrie. Oh, they'll be the best of friends, like your Ned and Lord Robert. They'll be more brothers than cousins. Truly, I just know it. She was so happy. But Lysa's blood had come not long after that, and all the joy had gone out of her. Catelyn had always thought that Lysa had simply been a little late. But she had been.
Oh, hold on. She was going to try to pass it off as Jon Arryn's kid.
I guess so. I misremembered, yeah.
She was. She was going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That just clicked for me.
She remembered the first time she gave her sister Robb to hold, small, red-faced, and squalling, but strong even then, full of life. No sooner had Catelyn placed the babe in her sister's arms than Lysa's face dissolved into tears. Hurriedly, she had thrust the baby back at Catelyn and fled. If she had lost a child before, that might explain father's words and much else besides. Lysa's match with Lord Arryn had been hastily arranged, and Jon was an old man even then, older than their father, an old man without an heir. His first 2 wives had left him childless. His brother's son had been murdered with Brandon Stark in King's Landing. His gallant cousin had died in the Battle of the Bells. He needed a young wife if House Arryn was to continue, a young wife known to be fertile.
Okay, wait, no, maybe I'm wrong then. So she would have been soiled, quote unquote, before the engagement to Jon Arryn.
Yeah, no. So it sounds like she was just late and thought that she had Jon Arryn's child, because we could presume that on the day of their marriage, her and Jon probably consummated it.
Right. But it still could be Littlefinger, because Lysa said she had sex with Littlefinger twice. It was the day that they all got drunk at that party.
And then it was when he was convalescing,
after, yes. Mm-hmm. And it could have been even more than that if he's still hanging around. So it's...
No, I think this was supposed to be Jon Arryn's, and I think this was the first of the 5.
I still think it could be Littlefinger's just because of how happy she is about it. I don't think she'd be this elated. She's jumping up and down.
Yeah, that's how I read it too.
If it was Hoster's, she would be like, oh, I did my duty, whatever. She's jumping up and down. And if you think about it, Littlefinger's duel with Brandon happens. Brandon immediately leaves to King's Landing. All that happens. Then the wedding, it could be a month, which makes sense. If she's having sex with Littlefinger, it'd be a month before she knows that she's pregnant. Like when her moon blood doesn't come. So,
because they talk about Jon taking her soiled. That implies that she's already soiled when he's agreeing to marry her. And Kat's saying he needed someone known to be fertile. So both of those things would point to Lysa already having miscarried Petyr's baby or been forced to abort it before this happened. Yeah,
she would have drank the tea before the wedding.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I can't see how it works otherwise.
Yeah.
Let's see, did we finish reading everything we wanted to read? No, we did not. Let's see. Lysa's match with Jon Arryn had been hastily arranged. Jon was an old man even then, older than their father, an old man without an heir. By the way, his heir was his nephew, Elbert Arryn, who died in King's Landing with Brandon, murdered by Aerys. Jon Arryn had just lost his heir. An old man without an heir, his first 2 wives had left him childless. His brother's son had been murdered with Brandon Stark in King's Landing. His gallant cousin had died in the Battle of the Bells. He needed a young wife if House Arryn was to continue, a young wife known to be fertile.
Catelyn rose, threw on a robe, and descended the steps to the darkest solar to stand over her father. A sense of helpless dread filled her. "Father," she said, "Father, I know what you did." She was no longer an innocent bride with a head full of dreams. She was a widow, a traitor, a grieving mother, and wise in the ways of the world. "You made him take her," she whispered. Lysa was the price Jon Arryn had to pay for the swords and spears of House Tully. Small wonder her sister's marriage had been so loveless. The Arryns were proud and prickly of their honor. Lord John might wed Lysa to bind the Tullys to the cause of the rebellion and in hopes of a son, but it would have been hard for him to love a woman who came to his bed soiled and unwilling. He would have been kind, no doubt, dutiful, yes, but Lysa needed warmth. The next day, as she broke her fast, Catelyn asked for quill and paper and began a letter to her sister in the Vale of Arryn. She told Lysa of Bran and Rickon, struggling with the words, but mostly she wrote of their father.
Okay,
Yes.
I think we could stop here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the part we wanted to read.
Yes, her figuring it out finally.
Yeah.
But shame on Catelyn. Like, I know this isn't a F Catelyn stream, but this is supposed to be your little sister. You're supposed to take care of her in a way, especially medieval times. Y'all are so close. Y'all have a secret language, and you don't know this stuff is going on. It's not like Lysa had other friends. It's so sad that you're putting this together in your 30s, but that's all I've got to say about that. Boo, Catelyn, for this little misstep.
So now we have set the stage. We know some of where the drama that started this. The other part of this is the duel with Brandon. So before we get to the duel with Brandon, let's just real quickly brush up on where Littlefinger comes from. He comes from Braavos. Specifically, his great-grandfather was a sellsword in service to a Lord Corbray. And then his son, Petyr's grandfather, became a hedge knight in Westeros and took the Titan's head as his sigil. And so there's a little passage about that. It says, within the tower seemed even smaller, an open stair stone. This is Petyr's tiny little tower on the fingers here. So within Petyr's very tiny, tiny tower, it seemed even smaller than on the outside. An open stone stair wound round the inside wall from undercroft to roof. Each floor was but a single room. The servants lived and slept in the kitchen at ground level, sharing the space with a huge brindled mastiff from Sothorios. No, probably not. And a half-dozen sheepdogs. Above that was a modest hall, and higher still the bedchamber. There were no windows, but arrow slits were embedded in the outer wall. Above the hearth hung a broken long sword and a battered oaken shield, its paint cracked and flaking. The device painted on the shield was one Sansa did not know. A gray stone head with fiery eyes. Upon a light green field. My grandfather's shield, Petyr explained when he saw her gazing at it. His own father was born in Braavos and came to the Vale as a sellsword in the hire of Lord Corbray. So my grandfather took the head of the Titan as his sigil when he was knighted. It's very fierce, said Sansa. Rather too fierce for an amiable fellow like me, said Petyr. I much prefer my mockingbird. So, interesting, a little bit of symbolism here. The Titan's head, mostly this is important for Petyr because it helps us understand that Sansa is going to be involved in taking Petyr down. I want to talk about that later, but there is this whole thing about giants and killing giants, and there's Bran's vision, and there's Sweet Robin's giant, and so this Titan's head figures into that. Petyr is a kind of giant in the shadows. The mockingbird is really interesting because a mockingbird, just like my bird Goose, a mockingbird does what? It mimics, it copies, it speaks with other people's voices. And that is a tactic that Petyr uses a lot. So the letter that went to Winterfell was not only Petyr speaking in Lysa's voice, Lysa's using her secret language that her and Cat only know, and Petyr is putting his words into that language. So like it's very mockingbird-like. What do you think of that one, Tim?
Yeah, because like, and we get this way because it also contrasts him away from ravens, who are also known to do the same thing by having him have this other bird sigil, and then connecting him to Braavos too. It also gives Petyr a sense of how he himself is otherized, because he himself in the show, he says, well, if you go back long enough, we've all came from somewhere. But his grandfather being from Braavos means that his place in Westeros is much more recent, so he can still be looked at, and like people will still side-eye him for being like, well, you're not really, as far as we're concerned, you're not like Westerosi born because of how little your family has been here. You're kind of you're more or less up jumped.
Yeah, and so that is Petyr's like Team Small Folk gone wrong, right, Nettles?
Yeah, that's generous. That's generous. But I see why you say that.
Yeah, but he came from nothing, He's not big and strong like the knights. He's a little guy. He's the underdog. Got to root for him. He's just a banker. Used his cleverness to rise up from nothing and show those brawny Starks who's got the real brains.
And he does. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I love Littlefinger. The way people love Cersei is the way that I love Littlefinger, because we know Cersei's bad, we know Littlefinger's bad, but he is standing in the room of movers and shakers. He has no money, no strength at arms, and he's in the room with them, moving them on the board. And I think that's the most impressive thing, because that's what I did. I had to use my mind to get ahead.
It is impressive. And this is the thing, like I said, Brandon made him feel small. Ed Muir is the one who gave him the nickname Littlefinger because he was small and from the fingers. So, like, he's from nowhere and he's small. And if you look at the story, you can see that each generation is moving a little bit further. And in fact, Petyr's father fought in the War of the Nine Penny Kings and befriended Hoster Tully, and that is why he is fostered at Riverrun with the Tullys. Each generation is doing a little better to the point where Petyr is fostered with a couple of very noble kids, with Blackfish as an honorary uncle and the education of Riverrun. This is a big boon to his father here. So Petyr just could have been patient and taken the next step, but instead he had to rule the world. And so that's what he's imagining. But let me read this. This is a good, actually, Tim, why don't you give us these two paragraphs here in blue? This is the Petyr that was promised by some smelly hermit.
It was 8 long days until Lysa Arryn arrived. On 5 of them it rained, while Sansa sat bored and restless by the fire, beside the old blind dog. He was sick and toothless to walk guard with Byron anymore, and mostly all he did was sleep. But when she patted him, he whined and licked her hand, and after that they were fast friends. When the rains let up, Petyr walked with her around his holdings, which took less than half a day. He owned a lot of rocks, just as he had said. There was one place where the tide came jetting out of a blowhole to shoot 30 feet into the air, and another where someone had chiseled the 7-pointed star of the new gods upon a boulder.
That's actually a historical monument right there, Petyr. That's kind of cool. Go ahead, Tim.
Petyr said they marked one of the places the Andals had landed when they came across the sea to wrest the veil from the first men. Farther inland, a dozen families lived in huts of piled stones besides a peat bog. Mine own small folk, Petyr said, though only the oldest seemed to know him. There was a hermit's cave on his land as well, but no hermit. He's dead now, but when I was a boy, my father took me to see him. The man had not washed in 40 years, so you can imagine how he smelled. But supposedly, he had the gift of prophecy. He groped me a bit and said I would be a great man, and for that, my father gave him a skin of wine. Petyr snorted. I would have told him the same thing for half a cup.
It's funny because it's just in a book full of prophecies and stuff. This is like the crappy, low-budget, bargain basement, discount version of all that, right?
But he was right.
But he was right.
Kind of, yeah. When Petyr says, I would have told him the same for half a cup, did Petyr have that kind of confidence when he was a kid? Probably not, actually. This is probably something that he says now, like retroactively shining up the story, my opinion. But
I think I wanted to point out was because Chat also mentioned the Spicer's family, Sybil Spicer. And the way that Petry Baelish is similar in that, like, because these are newly established families that come from places in the East, that come from the Free Cities. So for someone like your Tywin Lannisters, let's say, they're looking at them as the way Tywin would look at the Free City people, like, oh, they're cheesemongers, these merchant princes, just these up-jump merchants, bankers, and sellswords. It's very much of like the new money versus old money. Like, they're not blue bloods. They come in like this. And they say, like, if Stannis had his way, people like Varys and Littlefinger, their heads would be on spikes. And for Tywin, it's no different, except Tywin at least saw use in them, just as he saw use in the Spicers and the Westerlings to get his things across. But he doesn't have any respect for them. He's just begrudgingly giving tithes to them because they've proved some sort of usefulness.
It's similarly the way Tywin doesn't necessarily do the same kind of things that Amory Lorch and the Mountain do, but he employs them because they're useful. So I was going to point out that, the reason why I didn't take a bath in 40 years, because there is an inverse relationship to your ability to see the future and how clean you are. That is well known. So this guy's had a very good prophecy.
That also would show even more of Tywin's hypocrisy, because the Cleganes are just as ump-jumped, and they were done so by the Lannisters. But he's not treating the Cleganes with the same disdain that he would House Baelish or House Spicer.
Everybody's just up jump toll collectors, really. I mean, so I do love how they say that about like the Tyrells and the Freys. Everyone is always dissing people. Your house is 8,000 years old.
Yeah, a lot of the Riverlands would see the Tullys as up jumped, but that's mostly because Aegon was like, well, I can't give it to the Blackwoods or the Brackens. That's just asking for trouble. The Tullys got it because he needed like a neutral party.
The other part of the fostering at Riverrun is we hear Kat and Lysa and Petyr would play games and then sort of like preteen innocent games that preteens start to play. Kissing games. Petyr's trying to slip the tongue to both of them. Kat doesn't like it. Lysa does. This is what we're told. Then it comes down to this duel with Brandon. And so this is happening right around the tourney of Harrenhal. It's either right before or right after. It is not actually clear, but it is right around that time.
It had to be after.
After?
It has to be after because Brandon leaves almost from the duel to go to King's Landing to demand for his sister.
He is on his way back to Riverrun when he hears about Lyanna's abduction and goes south.
Right.
He is...
Isn't there like 6 months?
Yes, I think it's
tourney?
after. So it's a tourney of Harrenhal, and then essentially the betrothal's announced, and then that's when, Petyr challenges, they fight, and then Brandon leaves to go north, it says, to meet with the Starks coming south for his wedding to Kat, which never happened because he went to King's Landing instead. Okay. So this is that scene here. This is very foolish. Petyr is much younger and smaller than Brandon. There's no chance at all. It's kind of an emo thing to do. Like he's trying to make Kat feel sorry for him. He's trying to look valiant, but he knows he can't beat Brandon. So he's out here taking a beating to try to pull on Kat's heartstrings, but it's not under Kat's control who she marries, which is why it's kind of like tone deaf.
I don't see it as a sympathy thing at all. I think Petyr believes in John Quill and all the fairy tales, and he, in his mind, like I don't think Littlefinger is born yet. Like the Lord Baelish, he's not born yet.
No, he's not.
I think this is a Bran Stark and a Sansa hybrid. Someone who believes in the little guy will win. Like he was he at the tourney where we saw Howland Reed, the smallest guy there, get vindicated by the gods. They were bullying the small guy, and what happened? The small guy was out on top. So he just witnessed that. I'm not sure if he was there or he heard of it. Everyone's been talking about it, so he knows. So he has justification saying like, oh yeah, the good guy wins in the end. So I think he's going in this knowing that the gods will interfere and make him strong, even though he's never been strong in his life. Or Brandon will look in his eyes like a Stark's supposed to do. You're supposed to look in the person's eye and see if they should actually die or not, and then you decide whether to give him the sword. But he's hoping Brandon will look in his eye and be like, "Oh, this guy really loves Catelyn. I've got to cancel this betrothal."
Yeah, it might be something like that. Like he wasn't even sure exactly what he could make happen, but his love demanded that he do something, and he believed that somehow that would, So it's unrealistic, certainly.
And then if nothing else worked, Catelyn would run away with him in secret. You know, I think that's what he's thinking. Isn't that what they feed us with the fairy tales?
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that because I didn't come up with nearly so much. Tim, go ahead.
I was gonna say like Crispin Cole telling Rhaenyra like, oh, we could go sell oranges in the free cities. Like, no, but Petyr in this moment, I think of, if you've ever seen Not Another Teen Movie, the part that's riffing on John Cryer's character from 16 Candles, and the people in the background, but you hear the voice in the background like, she's just not that into you. You'll never be more than just a friend. Like that's what's going on with Petyr here.
And then to delve deeper into Littlefinger's psychology, going just back to him being, we just read where he's from. He's got a dirt farm, he's got some rocks, and he has 6 sheepdogs. I feel like Littlefinger was probably, he grew up with a single dad. And listen, shout out to single dads. Statistics say single dads fare better than single moms because for whatever reason, I don't want to go into that tangent, but I feel like Littlefinger had a good relationship with his dad. His dad provided. They probably had inside jokes. They probably named each of the sheepdogs and they had like a content experience. And then he goes to Riverrun for the first time and realizes that his dad ain't shit. And so many of us go through this in kindergarten when they have bring your parent to work day, where you think your parents are the best, you think everything's normal in your house, and then you see that like, oh shit, my dad is a trash man and everyone else's dads are doctors. So now and that's like a state of seeing your parents as not these superheroes. Now you're seeing them in relation to everyone else's household. And that's what Littlefinger is going through. So he was like, oh, I thought my life was great. And now he's like, oh, shit, I'm being abused, basically. You're supposed to eat 3 meals a day? Oh, shit.
Like I said, it's definitely about him feeling small.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that creates this thing of like, okay, like I could never live like that again. And that starts like the ambition. And so when you start wanting things, you look over at Catelyn and you're like, I don't want a normal girl. I want this girl. She's the personification of everything that I shouldn't be allowed to have.
Yes, the reason why Petyr wants Catelyn. That is exactly what I was wanting to get into. Both Lysa and Petyr are obsessive, and the targets of their affections are pursued more as prizes than as individuals that they want to gain the respect of. And so with Petyr, you're exactly right to zero in on that class difference because he feels small, he feels inferior. He's growing up with these kids who have much bigger houses than he does. Literally, okay, he's got the tiny tower. Oh, wait, he's got a little finger in a tiny tower.
There you go.
Making up for something, are we? Okay, so compensate much? But Tim, I want to kick this to you because I see you had thoughts on this. This is why I was trying to go back to this. But yeah, Littlefinger wanting Cat as a sort of way for him to status climb, to social climb, is that, I think that's a large part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not to say that there's no attraction, because obviously there is, but Littlefinger is also seeing like a way to climb that ladder, like Nettles had said. When you go from the fingers and you think, oh, hey, my life's pretty good, we're landed knights or what have you, but then you go and you see a real lord, a real castle. And I can think on that personal experience too, like the first time I went to a friend's house whose family was significantly wealthier than mine. I lived a very comfortable life. My parents worked, we always had a roof over our heads, but then I went to my one friend's house. Their family had acres of land and 16 horses because his mom liked horses. They didn't race them, they didn't breed them or anything. She just liked horses, so they had horse stables. And it's like, you have the money for all of this land and all of this stuff, and to feed 16 horses that you aren't doing anything with. And it's like, wow, what does your dad do? And then the culture, and then even more of a culture clash, when I met his mother and we started talking and she asked me like, well, how are you doing in school? And I told her my grades. She looks at her son, my friend, and she goes, why is he doing better than you? Not why aren't you doing as well? Why is he doing better than you? And I looked like, dude, she just insulted both of us. Like because I come from a less well-to-do family, that I should be like some drooling hick or something like that. Yeah, the true culture clash, when you get there and you see it, it makes you feel terrible. It makes you feel small. And it's like, my God, man, what the hell? When he looked at me, I could see just in his eyes, he was saying like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, for what his mother had just said to both of us.
But how did that make you feel or transform? Like, did that make you set any goals for yourself?
No, it just made me go like, dude, your mom's a and that's about it. And I'm like, when can we leave? We have things to do.
I was going to say, because I went to private school when I was young. My parents couldn't afford to send me, but they did anyway because they were Christian, and it was so important not to let public schools teach their son about evolution and science things. Yeah, it's lots of childhood trauma. In any case, the point is, most of the people in my school were definitely wealthier than me. Like I was in an apartment or a townhouse. Whenever I went to my friend's house, it was a single-family home in a nice neighborhood somewhere, in Northern Virginia. I think I definitely felt that. I felt the kind of angst because of that, but it made me find my own way to feel superior to them. And this is where it leads me back to Petyr. So for me, it was like and this probably a lot of people relate to this. This could just be you being a nerd or being a weirdo or having a little neurodivergence, social weirdness or something. And so you're not one of the cool kids in school, maybe especially in like junior high, early high school. By the time people get to 11th or 12th grade, they start letting their freak flag fly. They realize, well, I'm really good at trumpet or making weird art or whatever it is. And people start to get comfortable in the more or less, okay, you're not a cheerleader or a football player or the valedictorian. There are other cool things you can be and feel good about yourself. And so sometimes it takes us longer to do that, but you have to find something to make you feel good about yourself. And the negative version is, I feel inferior to those people, so I need to find a way to flip that around and feel superior to them. And that's what Littlefinger does, is he fools himself into thinking that his cleverness and his ingenuity and his ruthlessness and lack of morality, essentially, in playing the Game of Thrones better than other people, makes him superior. And by the time we get Ned Stark in King's Landing, Petyr is toying with Ned. He is giving him little clues and watching him try to put it together and be like, you're so bad at this. It's basically like Brandon toying with Petyr in the yard. Only this time, Petyr is the experienced warrior, and he's just playing with Ned and watching him try to pick up his sword. He's like, pfft.
Yeah.
So
Petyr knows the outcome, just like Brandon knew the outcome.
Yeah.
So he can play.
Right. And so that is one of my takes that I sort of came upon while thinking about this. We were talking about Nettles. You asked Tim, like, how did you respond to that? And in Tim's case, he's like, well, it basically just exposed the character of the person judging me, because it sounds like Tim was okay with who he was and was basically just able to say, well, that's a pretty strange way to judge people. You're messed up, which is good. That's a good, healthy response. Petyr, he had a low self-esteem. And he didn't have a secure base to sort of just throw that off, like when people called him Littlefinger. So I'll go ahead and read this, I guess. They met in the lower bailey of Riverrun. When Brandon saw that Petyr wore only helm and breastplate and mail, probably because he's too small to wear like full plate armor and he's not trained to do it, he took off most of his armor. Brandon, that is. Petyr had begged for her favor he might wear, and that's Catelyn's favor, but she had turned him away. Her lord father promised her to Brandon Stark, and so it was to him that she gave her token, a pale blue handscarf she had embroidered with the leaping trout of Riverrun. As she pressed it into his hand, she pleaded with him. He's only a foolish boy, but I have loved him like a brother. It would grieve me to see him die. I just want to observe that Cat, at this point, doesn't hate Petyr. She loves him like a brother. And it just makes it shittier that Petyr is so selfish with his obsession with Cat that he can't just accept being very good friends with her and having her regard. That's not enough for him. He's got to possess her.
I'm torn because I don't think Catelyn is in the position to even know if she has feelings for Littlefinger. Like, there's a dimension where because she's so obsessed with family duty honor. Her thing is like, I'm the perfect eldest daughter. I read, I write, I sew, I sing, and I'm going to marry whoever my dad tells me to. So I'm not even going to fall in love with anyone because I'm such a good medieval girl.
No, that's a valid perspective. But the point is, Lysa liked the tongue and she didn't. So she didn't have a crush on him. She doesn't have feelings for him that way. There's no evidence that she does. So
yes,
I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm saying even in Catelyn's mind, we would never know that because of how family duty honor focused she is.
Maybe.
I'm not saying she does definitely. I'm just saying that the brainwashing of the times is so thorough that I don't think Catelyn would even know at this age. Because she's like, oh, I'm going to get married to Brandon. Brandon's cool. Brandon's the popular footballer. And I'm the cheerleader. So we're meant to be, right? It should work. But we know in real life, the cheerleader and the football player it's not always the best.
You're reading, I feel like you're reading in a lot to the story there.
Yeah.
Myself.
Okay.
The first part I agree with more, where it's like she's obviously someone who's been trained to put her feelings in the back seat in favor of the family duty honor. I don't know about the football player cheerleader thing. Brandon sort of qualifies, but I don't know.
The football player and the cheerleader is the archetype of what femininity looks like and what masculinity looks like in the American lexicon.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It is a good match as far as it goes, but my point was just that, like, what she says here, I have loved him like a brother. I really think it's lame when somebody has a crush on someone and then turns on them and won't accept that person's friendship instead.
Yes.
That shows you that the affection was always something off with it. It's happened to everybody. You've had feelings for somebody and they said, you know, I like you, but not in that way. And you can either like pitch a fit about that and hate that person, or be like, it's okay, I'll get over it. I still like this person, I respect them. Because obviously if you have a crush on them, you have respect for them, you think they're interesting, cool, fun to hang out with, etc. So like a mature person gets over their crush, says, okay, well, we can still be friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tim, can you pick this up?
He is only a foolish boy, but I have loved him like a brother. It would grieve me to see him die. And her betrothed looked at her with the cool gray eyes of a Stark and promised to spare the boy who loved her. That fight was over almost as soon as it began. Brandon was a man grown, and he drove Littlefinger all the way across the bailey and down the water stair, raining steel on him with every step until the boy was staggering and bleeding from a dozen wounds. Yield, he called, more than once, but Petyr would only shake his head and fight on, grimly. Okay, so Brandon gave him numerous outs, and Pilger's like, no, love will conquer all. I'm gonna win. I can feel my second wind coming.
Brandon's not the villain. Brandon's not the villain.
But that's not your second wind. You have asthma, probably.
Not asthma.
When the river was lapping at their ankles, Brandon finally ended it with a brutal backhand cut that bit through Petyr's rings and leather into the soft flesh below the ribs, so deep that Catelyn was certain that the wound was mortal. He looked at her as he fell and murmured, "Cat." As the bright blood came flowing and between his mailed fingers, she thought she had forgotten that.
She didn't forget it. And as a woman, like, that would give me some good self-esteem to know that, oh, 2 men fought for me. Like, yeah. Catelyn has all the self-esteem in the world. Not only am I born into the perfect family, not only am I born with the perfect genes to fulfill femininity in the right ways of the time, but I got 2 men fighting for me. Woo, baby. And I'm about to get a third. I'm about to get Ned.
Well, I personally don't think she appreciated it, because it's not her choice. She doesn't have, like, this is just her friend making this really awkward and then getting himself hurt. Yeah. She didn't choose to marry Brandon, and she doesn't have the choice to marry Petyr if he fights well. So this is really just him making a big scene. That's why I said it's a very selfish thing to do, and it puts Kat in a really bad position. Like I said, they've grown up together. They are friends, even if Petyr does also have a crush or whatever on her. And instead of thinking about her position and what she's now having to deal with, he's only thinking about himself here. That's my take on it anyway. It
worked at Harrenhal, that's all I'm saying. Petyr's not crazy for trying this.
Yeah.
It worked at Harrenhal.
But you read this and it's like you feel that like secondhand embarrassment. It's like when someone posts a picture of them with their woman friend and they're like, don't we look like a great couple? And she's like, yeah, a couple of besties. And you just have to be like, dude, just stop. Just stop. Yeah. The secondhand cringe that you feel just from seeing it go down. And I'm sure that's also probably a feeling that she had while this entire thing was going on. Like, just stop. Even Brandon is just like, God, I hope I don't kill him, but he won't give up. You know?
Yield. Do you think this is the moment that birthed Littlefinger?
It's the beginning of it. It's the beginning of it. We'll get in 6 years is when he gets his first appointment in the Vale, and he's already an embezzler by then. So there's something happening in that time period. Oh, the last bit is important here because this leads us to the next timeline. A fortnight passed before Littlefinger was strong enough to leave Riverrun, but her lord father forbade her to visit him in the tower where he lay abed. Lysa helped their maester nurse him. She had been softer and shyer in those days. Edmure had called on him as well, but Petyr had sent him away. Her brother had acted as Brandon's squire at the duel, and Littlefinger would not forgive that. So here comes the grudge starting. As soon as he was strong enough to be moved, Hoster sent Petyr away in a clothes litter to finish his healing on the fingers upon the windswept jut of rock where he'd been born. After this fight, Brandon leaves to go north to meet the Stark party coming south to Riverrun for the wedding. And Petyr waits 2 weeks and then goes kind of like east and north. They both are passing through the Inn of the Crossroads. And this is where the theory comes from that Littlefinger is the one who spread the word that Lyanna was abducted by Rhaegar, where Brandon could pick it up. This all would have been happening right around the Inn of the Crossroads. That's where news passes. Someone like Littlefinger, potentially, this is the beginning of him using information as a weapon. I don't know if there's more details to this that I have not found. No, this is a In Deep Geek theory, but his must have taken down the video or something because I couldn't find it when I went to look for it the other day. That's all I could find is that they're in approximately the same time and place.
Yeah.
But Littlefinger doesn't say anything about it.
But I like that.
But coming
like
soon
that.
to a confession near you, perhaps, in the Winds of Winter.
Maybe.
I mean, Petyr's around to confess his crimes still, so.
And Petyr doesn't confess his crimes. Other people confess his crimes, right? Have we seen Littlefinger spilling the beans?
Well, him and Sansa start to get into it a little bit.
But it's still calculated. Littlefinger is only saying what he wants her to know in order for her to form a specific opinion. So I don't think he's going to be...
I think Sansa is a little bit of a weakness for Petyr in the sense that, like, if he were Larry Strong, like Larry Strong talks about having no attachments, no kids are a weakness, love is a weakness. In that sense, the most Machiavellian sense, which is Larry Strong, Petyr has this one thing, like he's trying to rule the world and play the Game of Thrones while also stealing and co-opting and grooming Sansa Stark as like a personal touch on the destruction of the rest of the House Stark. So,
because he looks at Sansa like second choice. It's like, what if I could go back in time 20 years and try again with Cat without Brandon Stark being an
second
obstacle?
chance, not second choice.
A second chance,
Right, okay.
Yeah, a duo. Like, this is his do-over.
Sansa is the better Catelyn. Like, if Catelyn is the symbol of the epitome of the class that he can't be in, Sansa is even better than that because she's the daughter of the man that took your woman. So now you're getting revenge again. You're getting revenge on the fact that you couldn't have Catelyn. Now you have the younger, better Catelyn. And now you have Ned's seed too that you can throw in his dead face.
So this is one thing interesting to me, Tim. I want to get your thought on this and your thought, Nettles. He sees Sansa as being like a better combination of both of them. Okay, so she's pliable like Lysa, but because she's young, not because she's unbalanced and traumatized. But he likes a pliable woman that he can manipulate. So Sansa checks that box, but Sansa is beautiful like Cat, so that clicks the obsession with Cat box. But then Petyr also sees Sansa as being a little bit like himself. And so he is also training her as a protege because she's smart. And so he's trying to say, oh, Cersei's a bad player of the Game of Thrones. Learn this lesson, Sansa. Learn this lesson, Sansa. And he's explaining what he does with the High Lords in the Vale. Sansa represents this interesting combination of things to him, where, again, pliable like Lysa, beautiful like Cat, and looks specifically like Cat. And then 3, there's this whole protege thing. What do you make of that, Tim, and then Nettles?
Yeah, because I was thinking of that, but then Nettles threw in that idea of also, but it's also, your enemy's daughter. Okay, revenge fucks are a thing, but to really be able to be like, for Littlefinger to have that moment where he could theoretically look at Ned Stark and say, your daughter calls me daddy too, just adds an even more just sickening layer on it. But for Petry Baelish, it becomes the cherry on top of everything else.
Yeah.
It does please him very much to have stolen Ned's role while also grooming her romantically. Petyr's relationship to Sansa is about as warped and inappropriate as any relationship in this whole story. I mean, it is sick and twisted on so many layers. Oh, man. Yeah, Petyr and Petyr are a loving pair. Exactly. Littlefinger loves Littlefinger. That's it.
If you've ever had spite as a motivator, that's what's going on with Petry Baelish.
Yeah.
Is she even 14 yet? Is she 13? She's 13.
I think she's 13.
Elaine
She's
is 14. Elaine is grown up because she's 14.
Yeah.
That's right.
She's 12 at the start of this, so it has to be 13 now.
So, but beyond the age, because we know the age gets blurry as soon as you hit 13 or 14 in Westeros. Growing up things start happening to you, and so you have to start operating like a grown-up. It's so much worse than that. But let's get into the Sansa stuff, since we're talking about it. Sansa needs rescuing. That's where it starts off. She's being abused by Joffrey. She needs rescuing. And so Petyr exploits that. And he comes and he rescues her, takes advantage of her need, but He also makes her complicit in the murder of Joffrey with the hairnet and lets her know that. And so now Sansa feels, she knows that she sorta kinda was in on the murder of Joffrey. And so this makes her more attached to Petyr. She could get exposed if the truth is known. And then we've got Petyr essentially planning to engage her to Harry the Heir, and then to bring her out as Sansa Stark. And this because Harry the Heir, once they kill Sweet Robin, which is obviously part of the plan, and he's going to make her complicit in that. He already is doing that with the drugs. It'll be basically the Vale and the North under Petyr's control through this Harry the Heir Sansa wedding. And then eventually, it's not hard to see, he'll be able to supplant Harry because Harry also already shows signs of being a potential abuser, of being Joffrey-like. And so it's only a matter of time before Sansa needs rescuing again from her bad marriage. And there is Petyr to put poison in his wine. And then he marries Sansa. And Petyr, by the way, is Lord of Harrenhal and Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. And so essentially, he would have control over the North, the Eyrie, and the Riverlands. That's more than half of the kingdom. That is his endgame. That is where he's going with this. And all the while, and the thing I wanted to highlight is that he's making her complicit in everything. It's almost like he's building a backdoor to blame her, but I mostly think he is just making sure her hands are dirty too in everything so that she has to cling to him.
That's
Bonnie
that scene
and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
That's that scene when he cuts the blood orange in half and offers, going back to the blood and citrus, it's like, keep your hands sticky. I love the juice, but I hate the sticky fingers. Keep your hands clean, Sansa. But in reality, he's making sure that she has dirt on her hands too, so that she's complicit with him. And that's why Sansa needs to like find a way to really get one over on Littlefinger for that to be his downfall.
And the fastest way to make someone fall in love with you, like scientifically, is to go through a trauma with them. Like if you go, like that's why, you know, fraternities and sororities are so close, because they're being hit with a paddle and going through the similar experience. So if I'm tying you to Joffrey's death and Lysa's death, and I'm the ringleader in both of them, now we have this shared experience that only us two can understand what we went through when we killed Joffrey together. And with Lysa, we just read a big ass trauma.
Yeah, I have trauma bonded and regretted it. I have done this thing.
Yeah.
So.
And then the other thing is with the Joffrey death, the hairnet, yes, it's getting her hands dirty, but now Sansa has a bit of pride too. Sansa hated Joffrey. Imagine accidentally killing the person that you hate. Like,
maybe she'll get there. Maybe that'll be a step on her coming to terms with it. It's like, actually, yeah, I did kill that bastard.
Yeah, I had something to do with it.
I didn't think about that.
So there's a little pride there.
Yeah.
But all of this that you've listed is creating a picture in Sansa's mind. So when the name Littlefinger comes up, it's good memories. It's, he saved me this time, he saved me that time, he saved me, he's given me a new identity. Like, there's nothing really bad that Sansa can say about Littlefinger at this time.
So is there any way that she can find out that he basically betrayed Ned and led to his downfall? Who would know that?
Well, Lysa just said it. You told me to put the poison in Jon's wine.
Right.
But I don't think she caught that, because she never thinks about it again, does she?
Well, but she could, though. George could bring that out at any point. Something else that someone could say could click about tears of Lys, and she could be like, wait, tears in Jon's wall, that's what she meant.
But even if that's one bad thing and 10 good things. So when you're still forming that frame of mind, it's going to be mostly positive when you're thinking about Littlefinger.
Well, I wasn't evaluating that. I mean, I think it's a mixed bag already, because she's accusing him when she's built in the Snowcastle scene. She's like, you told me you were going to take me home and you didn't. And that was uncharitably done. And he's like, yeah, I did kind of lie about that. And so, I mean, there's some stuff she's uncomfortable with, but it's very much a mixed bag. We see in her narrative a couple times she's like, no, I'm not alone. I'm Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell. But Petyr isolates her very effectively and makes her feel like she needs to get his approval. Yeah. We'll have to see. I found that Sansa Winds of Winter chapter very interesting myself.
Yeah. I think Oswell Kettleblack is someone to keep your eyes on, the Master at Arms for Baelish, because all three of his sons are in trouble, and if he has an out to save them by giving up Littlefinger, he might take it. Like, he might not be as much of Littlefinger's man as Littlefinger believes he is, just as his sons are all acting like double agents.
So the thing I want to talk about is the drug habit. Petyr is making Sansa complicit. He's basically having Sansa give Sweet Robin extra doses that the Maester doesn't want to give. So we're going beyond the medical advice. And Petyr is like, yeah, we just need to keep him quiet, and also we're planning to kill him. So the thing that people don't realize is that Lysa was taking drugs and giving them to Sweet Robin through her breast milk. And this is part of the point of her breastfeeding. She is hooked on sweet sleep. And so that is why when she dies, all of a sudden his shaking gets worse. And the Maester's like, oh, why do we have to up the dose? And Peter's like, well, we got to up the dose because it was in the breast milk.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And well, the last part of it is, how was Lysa getting drugs all these years?
Money? What do you mean?
No, from Petyr. Like, who was supplying them? It would have been Petyr.
Okay.
So, and you have to think about this. Like, Petyr has total control of Lysa over the course of this time. He's come to manipulate her. He's having her tell Jon to appoint him to certain posts and stuff. So if she's hooked on drugs and he doesn't want her to be, he could interfere with that. But he's not. He's probably supplying her with the drugs.
I mean, there's always the chance that, you could have an scrupulous maester, like a doctor whose prescription pad is very liberal. But you think at some point the maesters will be like, no, I think you've had enough. And there can always be the moments where Lysa's like, I'll tell you when I had enough. But no, it's more Petyr sneaking her more milk of the poppy. And then Gregor Clegane has the same thing. He's addicted to milk of the poppy. So just a huge fentanyl crisis in Westeros going on, apparently.
Yeah. It's like the wonder drug that they prescribe for everything. It's like headaches, sweet sleep. Oh, you're
milk
in a bad
of the
mood.
poppy. Milk of the poppy.
Period cramps. Everything.
Constipation. Milk of the poppy.
Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, Peter's been using drugs as well as Lysa's trauma to manipulate her all this time. And let's go back and see just what he was doing with that. So it's 282 when he moves back to the Pebbles to recover from Brandon's beating. And by 289, Jon Arryn is appointing him to a position in Goldtown, some sort of financial post. And what do you know? Littlefinger produces tenfold increases. Wow! He's really good at this banking stuff. So I think that we are supposed to understand that tenfold increases don't come from just crossing the T's and dotting the I's a little better. Yeah. That comes from exploiting corruption and being corrupt yourself. And we know that Lysa had Jon appoint him. So it's probably that Petyr picked out the position that he wanted based on understanding that there was a corrupt person that he could exploit or something like that, just to fill in the blanks. What do you think, Tim?
Inflation in a time of crisis. I've never heard of that before. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like, we're living through the exact same thing right now in our real world.
Peter's a very modern character, isn't he? Yeah, he's like a Wall Street cheat with a coke habit and stuff. He's bad.
Yeah. These Iron Bank bailouts, in their golden parachutes. No, yeah, it really is. But yeah, he is. That's why he's increasing the grains. He wants to have the grain stock so that he can up the price. He's getting those. What is it? Those tapestries. Tapestries that probably are lined with money. All the stuff that he's been embezzling that he'll get back. And then
I haven't heard of that. I just thought they were the
reason he wants this. The reason he wants the that was a theory I heard. One of the reasons that he wants the tapestry so much is that he's lined them with gold and other things, just things that he's embezzled. If we've already characterized Littlefinger as a drug dealer, and he's also a brothel owner, then lining things up with money or just some kind of hidden stash would totally be in character for those types of things that he's pulling off.
So we've got Petyr getting promoted, and then Jon Arryn goes to King's Landing to be Hand of the King. And so this is, when Robert is king. And then at some point, Jon Arryn brings him to court. And only 3 years later, he's made Master of Coin. Basically, he is embezzling his way to the top. That's what he's doing. He's doing various forms of financial chicanery. Some of it's out and out cheating. Some of it's clever, but sort of unethical manipulation of stock prices. And he's appointing his people to all the posts. So there's corruption going on and nepotism. Lysa paved the way for all of it. And I guess Jon Arryn never knew who it was that soiled Lysa, because if he had known it was Petyr, he wouldn't have promoted him, would he?
Yeah.
So Hoster must have kept that part under wraps. The Jon Arryn plan, we have covered most of this. But the point is, he's having some contact with Lysa, because how does he get Lysa to nominate him to these posts? He must be visiting the Eyrie sometimes on some business or other, or sending her letters. They've got some connection. They've been talking and having contact. Jon Arryn, like Tim said earlier, is out of the Vale most of the time. He's in King's Landing. Petyr is grooming her essentially and taking advantage of these, like I said, her trauma with the baby and all that stuff, providing her drugs. We don't know when that starts. He's embezzling his way to the top. And then comes the time when people try to foster Sweet Robin, because they can see that this isn't going well with Lysa raising him, and they want to foster him out to the Lannisters. And this is how Petyr convinced Lysa to kill her husband. He used this idea that they were going to take her son, which is really her and Petyr's son probably, Sweet Robin. They were going to take him. And so this is when they kill Jon Arryn. And I think this is how he's able to convince her to do that. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a hell of a thing. Even though they don't love each other still, like killing Jon Arryn,
Yeah.
Lord of the Eyrie, for Lysa, like that's just, she needed to be coaxed to do that, I'm sure. And they did it with this threat to take away her baby, because that's her trauma. We see her. She puts her hand over her stomach like the kid is still there 20 years later. Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to, I'll give it to you guys, but I just think that's the center of this thing emotionally, as far as Petyr taking advantage of her. The lever here is the kid. That's kind of what she's obsessed with, is Sweet Robin. And we see that.
All I can do is agree. I have nothing to say other than agree. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I try to get a couple things right, but... So yeah, I think Jon Arryn is probably a good administrator, but he is not a good Game of Thrones player. Like, he does a decent job as Hand of the King, somewhat. It's mostly. Well, I mean, Petry Baelish is putting the crown in debt right under his nose. So maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe he just sort of kept things stable or whatever. But no, he's old, and he's obviously not like on the level of some of these players. Yeah.
Because Ned says himself, like, how could Jon Arryn let Robert beggar the realm the way he has? And it's like, because he wasn't paying good enough attention.
Yeah.
Man's old. He can't have eyes. He doesn't have eyes everywhere. He's not Varys in that way.
A lot of characters' downfall comes down to their house words. House Arryn, house words, as high as honor. Jon's like, I have honor. You have honor. Everyone has honor. I'm just going to think everyone's working with honor. Like,
I think there's definitely some of that going on. Be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they lied to me.
Yeah.
Whereas your master of coin is, like Chad said, he's a fixer. Like, you're relying on a guy who knows how to discreetly get rid of a body. All right, like, that's not. You shouldn't expect honor from someone like that.
So let's talk about Ned for a second. I mentioned this, that, you know, for Petyr, this is the dessert. This is the icing on the cake of this whole scheme. He's got Ned down in King's Landing. He is playing with him. He's giving him clues. He's watching him try to figure out what Jon Arryn knew. And he's having just a great time with it. You remember when Kat came to King's Landing, Petyr hears about it, intercepts her, takes her to his brothel, and then makes Ned go and meet her at the brothel. So this is delightful for Petyr, because it makes Ned very uncomfortable, because it's a brothel. And he's like, oh, I have control of your wife. I have her hidden away. Come and find her. I'll bring you to where she is. Like, it's very, Ned doesn't like it. And it's meant for him not to like it.
Symbolically, you've taken Kat, who's a Madonna figure, and you've brought her as low as a as a
Thank
sex
you.
worker.
Yeah, exactly. It's archetype clash, isn't it? Yeah. Then we get the final scene where Ned and Littlefinger are discussing the idea of bribing the gold cloaks. And I thought this might be a good one to read. So when he was done, Ned chose each word with care. When he was done, he signed the letter. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Hand of the King, Protector of the Realm, blotted the paper, folded it twice, and melted the sealing wax over the candle flame. His regency would be a short one, he reflected, as the wax softened. That's true. The new king would choose his own hand. Ned would be free to go home. The thought of Winterfell brought a wan smile to his face. He wanted to hear Bran's laughter once more, to go hawking with Robb, to watch Rickon at play. He wanted to drift off to a dreamless sleep in his own bed with his arms wrapped tight around his lady Catelyn. Cain returned as he was pressing the direwolf seal down into the soft white wax. Desmond was with him, and between them, Littlefinger. Ned thanked his guards and sent them away. Lord Petyr was clad in a blue velvet tunic with puffed sleeves, his silvery cape patterned with mockingbirds.
I suppose congratulations are in order, he said as he seated himself.
Ned scowled. The king lies wounded and near to death.
I know, Littlefinger said. I also know that Robert has named you Protector of the Realm.
Ned's eyes flicked to the king's letter on the table beside him, its seal unbroken. And how is it you know that, my lord?
Varys hinted as much, Littlefinger said, and you have just confirmed it.
Ned's mouth twisted in anger. Damn Varys and his little birds. Catelyn spoke truly. The man has some black art. I do not trust him.
Excellent. You're learning. Littlefinger leaned forward. Yet I'll wager you did not drag me here in the black of night to discuss the eunuch.
No, Ned admitted. I know the secret Jon Arryn was murdered to protect. Robert will leave no trueborn son behind him. Joffrey and Tommen are Jaime Lannister's bastards, born of his incestuous union with the queen.
Littlefinger lifted an eyebrow. Shocking, he said in a tone that suggested he was not shocked at all. The girl as well? No doubt. So when the king dies...
The throne, by rights, passes to Lord Stannis, the elder of Robert's two brothers.
Lord Petyr stroked his pointed beard as he considered the matter. So it would seem. Unless,
my lord, there is no seeming to this. Stannis is the heir. Nothing can change that.
Stannis cannot take the throne without your help. If you're wise, you'll make certain Joffrey succeeds.
Ned gave him a stony stare. Huh? Oh, no, sorry, wrong. Different.
Yeah.
Dude, what?
Yeah.
Joffrey, what? Have you no shred of honor?
Oh, a shred, surely. Littlefinger replied negligently. Hear me out. Stannis is no friend of yours, nor of mine. Even his brothers can scarcely stomach him. The man is iron, hard and unyielding. He'll give us a new hand and a new council for certainty. No doubt he'll thank you for handing him the crown, but he won't love you for it, and his assent will mean war. Stannis cannot rest easy on the throne until Cersei and her bastards are dead. Do you think Lord Tywin will sit idly while his daughter's head is measured for a spike? Casterly Rock will rise, and not alone. Robert found it in him to pardon men who served King Aerys, so long as they did him fealty. Stannis is less forgiving. He will not have forgotten the siege of Storm's End, and the Lords Tyrell and Redwyne dare not. Every man who fought beneath the dragon banner or rose with Balon Greyjoy will have good cause to fear. Seat Stannis on the Iron Throne, and I promise you, the realm will bleed.
So this confirms what we were talking about earlier. What is Littlefinger doing? He's trying to prop up Robert. He doesn't want King Stannis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he's like, well, we'll prop up Joffrey then, but we're not going to have Stannis. Trust me, we don't want that. Now, he's sort of making a coherent point, but he's also making like a corrupt person's point, which is like, oh no, not the just guy. He'll enforce the rules. That'll lead to all kinds of trouble.
Yeah. But this is like here, we've discussed like many times, like the idea that Stannis is iron and he'll break before he bends. And we know that not to be true, but Littlefinger is playing up the worst aspects of people have in mind, that it's like, oh, with Stannis, once guilty, you're always guilty, that he's going to hold old grudges from years ago. Like, it doesn't matter that Balon Greyjoy's rebellion was 10 years ago, that Robert's rebellion was 20 or however many years have passed this point. Like, he's going to judge them as all guilty, which I don't think Stannis would do. I don't think he would. I don't think he's going to. He's going to hold old grudges like that. Like, he's going to take the throne and immediately be like put Mace Tyrell's head on a spike for things that happened almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah, right. He's playing it up for sure. Yeah,
I can give you that.
Oh yeah, like you ain't gonna look at Mace Tyrell and be friends with him all of a sudden. But I think Stannis is the type of person who's gonna realize it was war. You fought on your side and I fought on mine, and like that's the way it is. Like, to go.
Well, why hasn't he forgiven Robert for not giving him Storm's End then? Stannis holds grudges. That's all I'm saying.
He does hold grudges. He does. He's just more pragmatic than
I think he's more.
You think of him as, because he comes across like a hard ass, and everyone talks about him like a hard ass. But if you actually look, he does compromise on stuff somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's more his female daughter as the heir. Yeah.
Well, with Robert, it's like, that's different. That's family. Like, it's more personal when it's your brother slighting you. It's different when you were a commander on an opposing side. So, like Dave said, I think Stannis is more pragmatic than that to hold Mace Tyrell up like that. But with Robert, when it's your brother, then you feel personally slighted of, why did you pass me up? Why did you give Storm's End to Renly? But Robert would be the type of like, but I made you Prince of Dragonstone. Doesn't that, account for anything?
No, because you can't grow crops on Dragonstone, but still.
It's the principle of the thing.
Okay, so let's see here. Where were we? I'll pick this up. Now look at the other side of the coin. Joffrey is but 12, and Robert gave you the regency, my lord. You are the hand of the king and protector of the realm. The power is yours, Lord Stark. All you need do is reach out and take it. Make your peace with the Lannisters. Release the imp. Wed Joffrey to your Sansa, wed the younger girl to Prince Tommen, and your heir to Myrcella. It will be 4 years before Joffrey comes of age. By then, he will look to you as a second father, and if not, well, 4 years is a good long while, my lord. Long enough to dispose of Lord Stannis. Then, should Joffrey prove troublesome, we can reveal his little secret and put Lord Renly on the throne. We? Ned repeated. Littlefinger gave a shrug. You'll need someone to share your burdens. I assure you my price would be modest.
Just your daughter and your wife.
Oh, man. Your voice. And sorry, go ahead and pick up the Baelish here, Tim. Your price, Ned's voice, was ice. Lord Baelish, what you suggest is treason.
Only if we lose.
You forget, Ned told him. You forget Jon Arryn. You forget Jory Cassell. And you forget this. He drew the dagger and laid it on the table between them. A length of dragon bone and Valyrian steel as sharp as the difference between right and wrong, between true and false, between life and death. They sent a man to cut my son's throat, Lord Baelish.
Littlefinger sighed. I fear I did forget, my lord. Pray forgive me. For a moment I did not remember that I was talking to a Stark. His mouth quirked. So it will be Stannis and war.
It is not a choice. Stannis is the heir.
Far be it from me to dispute the Lord Protector. What would you have of me then? Not my wisdom, for a certainty.
I shall do best to forget your wisdom, Ned said with distaste. I called you here to ask for the help you promised Catelyn. This is a perilous hour for all of us. Robert has named me protector, true enough. But in the eyes of the world, Joffrey is still his son and heir. The queen has 12 knights and 100 men-at-arms who will do whatever she commands, enough to overwhelm what remains of my own household guard. And for all I know, her brother Jaime may be riding for King's Landing even as we speak, with the Lannister host at his back.
And you without an army. Littlefinger toyed with the dagger on the table, turning it slowly with a finger. There is small love lost between Lord Renly and the Lannisters. Bronzeoin Royce, Sir Balon Swan.
One more time, Tim.
Bronzeoin Royce.
There we go. That's him.
Sir Balon Swan, Sir Loras, Lady Tanda, the Redwyne twins. Each of them has a retinue of knights and sworn swords here at court.
Renly has 30 men in his personal guard, the rest even fewer. It is not enough, even if I could be certain that all of them would choose to give me their allegiance. I must have the gold cloaks. The city watch is 2,000 strong, sworn to defend the castle, the city, and the king's peace.
But when the queen proclaims one king and the hand another, whose peace do they protect? Lord Petyr flicked at the dagger with his finger, setting it spinning in place. Round and round it went, wobbling as it turned. When at last it slowed to a stop, the blade pointed at Littlefinger. Why, there's your answer, he said, smiling. They follow the man who pays them. He leaned back and looked Ned full in the face, his gray-green eyes bright with mockery. You wear your honor like a suit of armor, Stark. You think it keeps you safe, but all it does is weigh you down and make it hard for you to move. Look at you now. You know why you summoned me here. You know what you want to ask me to do. You know it has to be done, but it's not honorable, so the words stick in your throat.
Ned's neck was rigid with tension. He's imagined the veins just like, it's like Stannis' teeth grinding happening here. For a moment, he was so angry that he did not trust himself to speak.
Littlefinger laughed. I ought to make you say it, but that would be cruel. So have no fear, my good lord. For the sake of the love I bear for Catelyn, I will go to Janos Slint this very hour and make certain that the city watch is yours. 6,000 gold pieces should do it. 1/3 for the commander, 1/3 for the officers, 1/3 for the men. We might be able to buy them for half that much, but I prefer not to take chances. Smiling, he plucked up the dagger and offered it to Ned, hilt first.
He doesn't love Catelyn because he said, for the sake of the love I bear Catelyn, I'm gonna get Janos on their side. So,
yeah, no, I think Catelyn, at some point, like, it became about the grudge and not Catelyn. Yeah, he destroyed her family. So,
yeah. Well, he also can see too, but he needs to get rid. Like Stannis can't get on the throne. He sees it's the grudge, but he also legitimately sees Ned as a threat because if he follows through on what Ned wants to do, then he knows that's his own ass. So
Stannis.
That's the thing. That's why Ned is a fool. Littlefinger's like, here's what we should do. And Ned's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do this. But you'll still help me, right? It's opposite of what you wanted to do, but you'll still help me, right? And he's like, yeah.
He's being flipped around on Littlefinger, like whether he can trust Littlefinger or not. This whole Lord's dance makes Ned feel... Ned walks away feeling like, oh, this was my idea. I'm in control, and I'm working with Littlefinger. But in reality, Littlefinger already knew the end result and just did this for fun.
Right, and that's why I was saying Ned is dumb because Littlefinger is like, here's what we should do. And he's like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing the opposite. And you'll still help me, right? It's like, no, he's not going to help you. He wanted to do the other thing. He just said, if you put Stannis on the throne, it's going to lead to war and stuff. Yeah. So, of course, he's not going to help you do that. And so then at the end, when Littlefinger betrays him, he's surprised. And he's just like, what did you expect?
Littlefinger wins. Woohoo! I wonder if this will fill the void in his heart. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's normalized to me, and maybe this is something I need to talk to my psychiatrist about. But it just makes perfect sense that, like, I know that feeling of looking at people who are nice to you, the haves, and you being a have-not, and looking at them and knowing that you need them to live your luxurious lifestyle, but you hate them, and all you want to do is put them in their place. And I feel like that's where Littlefinger is at. Like, what reason does he have to hate Ned? And Ned is honorable. Ned has lived up to everything other than fathering a bastard. But I feel like he hates them. He hates him in this instance.
As far as Ned, it's definitely misplaced anger because it's Brandon that Littlefinger hates, but because Ned married Cat, Ned becomes the stand-in for his hatred of Brandon Stark.
Well, yeah, you're right that Nettles, he hates that Ned is honorable because he has specifically jettisoned honor, and he's using that as a way, again, for him to feel superior to all the big brawny knights. You know, he's like, well, I'm more clever. But that cleverness is really a lack of honor. So he's got to characterize Ned's honor as stupid, because that's really the reason why Ned is a good person and a better person than Petyr. So he has to denigrate it as worthless. Absolutely. And everybody struggles with Ned's honor in that way, doesn't it? Because it sort of like puts the spotlight on their own lack of ethics that they have surrendered to play the Game of Thrones. Go ahead.
And when you talk about kill the boy, the thing that when people hate other people, it's usually because there's something in common. Like Littlefinger, like I proposed, he did used to be that honorable person who believed in John Quill and the Knights and honor and all that stuff. But that was but reality in real life killed that within him. It killed the boy. So when he sees that Ned is allowed to walk around with honor, it's like, hey, that's not fair. I had that. I had that lust for life and that twinkle in my eye. And everyone taught me, and life taught me, that you can't be that way, that you have to be sly. You have to be nasty. The only way to get ahead is through those avenues. So seeing that in Ned would make you hate that, because that used to be me. So how come you're allowed to walk around like that? Like that's how I see it.
And what's funny here is that Ned is doing a dishonorable thing. He is relying on, Littlefinger just told him, yeah, we're going to bribe the gold cloaks. And I'll have Janos Slynt do it. Ned knows what kind of person Janos Slynt is by now. Mm-hmm. And he knows what kind of person Littlefinger is. And yet he feels like he has no choice but to rely on these people. This is not normally a Ned Stark thing to do, and it bit him in the ass. So it's almost like really Ned should have been, he should have found a way to be more honorable about this. I don't know, like what Ned should have done is a whole can of worms. I don't know if you guys want to tackle that, but like he's doing something that violates his own ethics here, and it does lead to his downfall. I can't help but notice that. And then that brings us to the master plan, which we talked about as far as Harry the Heir, the Vale, the Riverlands, and the North. But a couple of questions that I thought would be interesting is, how will Petyr react when new things come into the equation? So, for example, Fagon is now attacking Westeros and presenting himself as Rhaegar's son. He's going to march on King's Landing and presumably take it from Cersei, based on the whole Mummer's Dragon cheering crowds thing. And so some people have wondered, well, maybe Fagon and Sansa will become a political match. And one thing that's for sure is that Petyr is putting himself in a position to force the Fagon regime to deal with him as almost like an equal, because he's going to control potentially so much of the land. So what do you guys think? And Tim, we'll go to you first, since me and Nettles have been talking back and forth a bunch. What do you think Littlefinger will do with news of Fagon hits? And then the second question is going to be Dany as well, same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that if Littlefinger has shown anything, is that he knows how to pivot. And like, we get that chaos as a ladder line from the show. And while it doesn't appear in the books, it's still very much true for him. So the idea of proposing Sansa as a potential bride for Fagon is definitely something I could see him doing, even though it means giving up a piece that he wants for himself. However, and this is what makes the fact that the Sunderlands are Blackfyre supporters so important, because it's one of those blink and you miss it details. When we did the chapter where we did the Davos chapter, where he's the dinner with a deep one, when he's eating with Godric Burrell brings up the fact that like the Sunderlands drug us into the Blackfyre rebellions and the Three Sisters bled for it. And then he brings up the fact that Tristan Sunderland has 7 sons, all of them want to be knights, and he's like, it takes a lot of fish to pay for all those destriers. Well, in the Winds of Winter Sansa sample chapter, when she's trying to set up this tournament for Sweet Robin's personal guard, his winged hussars, 3 of the participants are 3 of Tristan Sunderland's sons. So there are Blackfyre supporters in the Vale in the presence of Littlefinger. So there already is an established connection between Fagon's group and Littlefinger, and the means of bringing Littlefinger in on the scheme, which would be ironic if it happens, because it's Varys' plan, and Littlefinger and Varys are at odds. So to see them start to merge together, and Littlefinger now trying to take on Varys' whole master experiment to try and propel his own way, it makes for like such good intrigue if that happens.
First of all, I am shocked by your encyclopedic knowledge of potential Blackfire supporters. You have a Bloodraven-like knowledge of Blackfire supporters. And then the second thing is, as I kick it to you, Nettles, is that I don't want to define it just as will there be a Fagon Sansa wedding arrangement, because there's obviously Arianne is in play and the Harry the Heir thing is happening. You can answer it in a broader sense. How will Petyr react to Cersei being potentially overthrown and Fagon taking the throne?
Yeah, I mean, I see Fagon coming as like something similar to the Red Wedding. Like, I don't think that that's something that Littlefinger planned, right? He had no knowledge of it because he would have never been part of any plan that eliminates Catelyn, because I feel like at first Catelyn was the original goal, then Catelyn was off the board, so he moved on to Sansa. So Fagon, I think, is a thing that he wasn't counting on because it was a Varys plot, and we know that Littlefinger has a few blind spots, one of them being Sansa. I think the other one is Varys.
I wanted to ask you, just to follow up, Varys was already plugged in King's Landing and installed under Aerys. So when Littlefinger gets to King's Landing, Varys already has his spy network. Do you think Littlefinger is completely ignorant of Varys' plotting with Illyrio, or does he have a whiff of it? Does he know Dany? I mean, Dany has any connection to them? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he just has a whiff of it, and the whiff is just not enough. No matter what that whiff is, it's just not enough. Varys is working on a different level than Littlefinger. I think that they're equals. I'm not going to say Varys is better at the game than Littlefinger. I really do think that they're equal because of their gifts. But yeah, I think that he will kind of deal with it in the same way that with the Red Wedding, which is he will just climb the ladder of chaos, and he'll welcome it like, oh, another player on the board. How can I use this to my advantage? How can I weasel myself in? Who do I know in this camp? Who can I use? Who can I buy? But
he might just hope that everything keeps them busy in the South. Like all the upheaval in the South allows him the cover to, like, because he needs to go collect the North. Like, it's one thing to marry Sansa to Harry the Heir, but at some point they've got to go up to Winterfell and claim that shit with an army or something. So
it might change his plans too, make his plans more Southern ambitions, just because he's more familiar with that. And the South is more predictable than the North.
So then, Tim, do you think that Littlefinger has much of an inkling as to what Varys has been up to with Illyrio? And then moving on, how do you think these guys will handle it when Dany gets here?
Littlefinger has a whiff of what Varys is up to, probably doesn't know the whole thing. I'm sure he's aware of Illyrio. Like, the richest man in Pentos is not going to go unnoticed by someone like Littlefinger. He's probably got tabs on the free cities just as much as he has on Westeros. But yeah, to be able to to secure the North and the Riverlands and the Vale, and then to present Sansa as a potential bride to Fagon, because that's another thing, because he has to outbid Doran Martell if that's the road he's going to take, because Doran Martell, by marrying Arianne to Fagon, because he sent Arianne out to go meet Fagon up in the Stormlands, he's like, okay, I can secure you at least one kingdom, but if a Littlefinger can counteroffer and say, yeah, but I can give you 3, and they're all more populous than Dorne, and they all have bigger armies than Dorne.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it might be a thing, yeah. Sorry, Harry, Yeah,
so it's gonna be like a bride bidding war when Fagon comes to town.
So yeah, it could be pretty interesting. And I guess, by the time Dany gets here, the long night might be just about falling. So I think maybe the better question is really like, when does Petyr and Sansa, when do they plan to go north to try to claim Winterfell? And how will that interact with the Boltons and Stannis and Wyman Manderley and all that stuff? But that's for George to figure out who wins the winter, I guess, unless anybody has an idea.
I
don't really know, yeah. They've got an untouched army is the point, though. We all know that. Just like in the show, the Vale army's been kept out of the fighting, and they're still, strapping and ready to go. So the last part is just what I said. Petyr is a giant, and Sansa is a giant slayer. And this has been foreshadowed. So Bran's vision, this is from a Game of Thrones, his original Coma Dream vision. He saw the great blue-green rush of the trident. He saw his father pleading with the king, his face etched with grief. He saw Sansa crying herself to sleep at night, and he saw Arya watching in silence and holding her secrets hard in her heart. There were shadows all around them. One shadow was as dark as ash, with the terrible face of a hound. Another was armored like the sun, golden and beautiful. This is ABC symbolism here. This is easy stuff, right? Over them both loomed a giant in an armor made of stone. But when he opened his visor, there was nothing inside but darkness and thick black blood. So this is Gregor. It definitely sounds like Gregor as far as a stone giant, darkness in the helmet, black blood. The mountain, he becomes undead. He has black blood. The head has potentially been swapped. We don't know. He's all, closed up or whatever. However, this does seem to also potentially refer to Baelish as a giant looming over all top of them, because Baelish is actually the master manipulator behind a lot of these figures, and he is also up on a mountain called the Giant's Lance, and he has this Titan's head symbol in his background. So literally on top of the giant's mountain, you have this guy with a giant's head. He is a shadow figure. He is looming over everybody. So I think this is double duty here, but we get more of the giant stuff, of course, in the Sweet Robin scene. But basically, you guys remember, they wrestle over the giant, and then the thing is that Sansa, after she tears its head off, she takes the head and she sticks it on a spike, which is like a twig, and sticks it outside of the castle of Winterfell. And Peter's like, if legend says that's not the first giant mounted on the gates of Winterfell. And she's like, those are only stories. And she walks away. Oh, and then there's also an actual vision from the ghost of Highheart, too. I forgot about that. What makes this even more clear. I dreamt of a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs. That's Sansa's hairnet. And later I dreamt that maid again slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow. So that is not a prophecy of her ripping apart Sweet Robin's doll. Sweet Robin's doll is more prophecy for something that is still coming, essentially. More foreshadowing for Sansa slaying a giant, which again is Petry Baelish because of the Titan's head. And because he is atop the Giant's Lance, which is a giant's castle.
So you're saying this is a prophecy of Sansa taking down Littlefinger?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess the question of the castle made of snow, because it could work for both the Eyrie and Winterfell of where will his downfall happen? Will it happen in the Vale or will it happen in the North?
Yeah, that is one of those things. Could be either. Because they're entirely parallel locations. And it would make more sense to be in Winterfell because they're going to make some move to take Winterfell to claim it for Sansa. And Sansa is inside the mini version of Winterfell in the Eyrie when it's like, where did that strength come from? Is she stronger inside Winterfell? And that's when she's standing up to Petyr.
Yeah, because there can still be witnesses from the Vale in the North if the Knights of the Vale and Sweet Robin's, again, his winged hussars accompany Sansa up north, then there will be witnesses for both the North and the Vale to it.
And her turning back into a Stark might mean getting in touch with her skin changer magic and having her skin change birds, because I think that is part of what Martin is doing with all this little bird stuff. And we've seen that Bran gave Jon a boop and awakened his skin changing gift. And so maybe Bran will do that to Arya. And Arya will be able to use ravens because there's not enough raven skin changing happening,
Yeah. You mean Sansa?
Yeah.
You said Arya.
You said Arya.
I meant Sansa. I did mean it. Yeah. So Arya's going to be doing wolf stuff. We know that.
He's got the wolf army.
No, I really do think Sansa's magic will be awakened and she will be skin changing birds. But she probably will have some help from someone too. So we'll see.
Imagine Sansa becoming the most Stark out of all of them. The one who wanted to escape Winterfell the most, who thought that she was a Southern lady, but maybe she's a wild Stark in disguise. We'll see. Come on, George.
Well, I definitely think that she, you could see it being set up, of her like reclaiming her Stark identity as she throws off her disguise and stuff like that. So, and you can see that it's important to her in the Vale as Petyr is trying to isolate her and tear down her identity. she doubles down on that Winterfell starkness in order to find some strength. So it's definitely still in there for sure.
That would be it. The princess saving the prince. If she is to keep if she's going to keep Sweet Robin alive.
That would be a nice inversion of the Falcon saving the Idun as a nut. Yeah, that would be a good inversion of it. I like that. So that's my last bit that I have for you as far as the foreshadowing. But let's open it up to a general discussion of sort of Petyr endgame. If there's anything we didn't cover as far as what he's trying to do, what anyone thinks is going to happen.
It's hard because for me, it just goes back to my first question of what is love? Like, because I am able to predict Littlefinger if I could know whether he what is his driving force? Is it love? Is it ambition? Or is it anger? Because all three of those things will have you diverging onto different paths. And honestly, I haven't been able to figure it out. Like, call me whatever you want, but yeah, sometimes I am in the frame of Littlefinger is looking at this as like love. Just because we as the reader can see that he doesn't truly love Catelyn, it doesn't mean that Littlefinger sees that. Littlefinger is truly capable of being like, I love Catelyn, and he believing that. But us, because we have 2024, we have psychology at our fingertips, we can look things up. We know that that's not real love, but that doesn't change Littlefinger's motivation and what he knows, which is going to be limited because they're living in medieval times. Psychology, they would probably laugh at that, the idea of it.
I think it's telling that his confession of loving Cat comes in a moment when he's deliberately using it as a weapon to hurt Lysa right before he murders her. So I would say that undercuts the sincerity of it just a little bit.
You think so? See, I don't think anything of it.
You think so? Yeah, I do. I do think so.
I think it's spite, to be honest.
Yeah.
He's a narcissist. It's, if I can't have it, nobody can. That's Littlefinger. He would rather have, like that line, like, Littlefinger would burn King's Landing to the ground if it meant he could be king of the ashes. Mutually assured destruction. Like, that is it. Spite is his great motivating factor.
I think so too. I think the ambition serves the goal of spite and revenge. That's why he's ambitious, is because he is motivated to make the other people feel small and for him not to feel small. I think that is where it all comes from. Yeah.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't know. It's hard to predict him because he's written this way.
Well, what's hard to predict about him?
The end game. What he truly wants. What will he be content with? Because most of us, like, if I'm like, hey, Dave, here's $22 million. You'll be content with that. Like, and other people, they'll be like, no, I saw that in your ledger that you had 33 million. And I want that. Like, it's when you know someone's base readings, you can predict them. And I'm just saying that, like, I don't know what he wants. Will he ally with Fagon? Because to him, that's enough. Or does he want something more? So Fagon is something, you know what I mean? Like,
well, so I guess I was saying we can see that he's going to be able to possess and control the Vale and the North with this Sansa Harry the Heir wedding. He technically is Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, being the Lord of Harrenhal, although he has not really claimed that either. So he's got to claim this stuff, but he has the rights to it. So the question that I get to is, like, does he see the Seven Kingdoms dissolving through all of this turmoil to where these three kingdoms that he controls can be their own kingdom, and he could actually be King Petyr with Queen Sansa of this northern kingdom? Or is it more like just becoming a very powerful lord of three realms and then just being rich and powerful and, seeing where it goes from there, kind of?
No, I think when it comes to the Chaos Ladder, for Littlefinger, there is no end. There's no top of the ladder. It's just steps all the way up. So I don't think he'd be happy with just three kingdoms. I don't think he'd be happy with all of Westeros. Like, I don't think it would ever be enough. He's just going to keep.
You're probably right. If he took over Westeros, he'd be like looking over at Essos, be like, those free cities look awfully ripe for the plucking. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
I think for Littlefinger, it's on the Iron Throne with specifically Sansa at his side and no foes that could take it away from him ever again. to never have the fear, because that's what drives us. People who grow up poor or who grow up disadvantaged, what you're running towards is to eliminate that fear of that someone could take that away from you, because you've had something at some point and someone took it away from you. So your thirst for money or knowledge or power is actually the thirst of having something that nobody can take away from you. And the way you do that is to eliminate your enemies. And so that's what Littlefinger's doing. So his end goal would be, yes, him controlling all of Westeros with Sansa by his side and no enemies around him. But we know that, like, come on. That's it. That's a needle in a haystack. That's almost impossible to achieve.
Yeah, so we're all on the same page then. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say, like, again, the steps are never ending. If Littlefinger had the whole world, then he'd be looking at the moon and doing space exploration. Like, that's where I see Littlefinger. It's never going to be enough.
Will she need physical help or maybe like psychological help to like see what's going on? Will someone need to point it out to her and sort of help her put this stuff together? Be like, this guy killed your family, right? Like, something like that, I wonder, could be coming.
Yeah.
I think both psychological and physical help.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it happens, it's going to be one of those, the students are passing the master moments.
Yeah.
It's Vader turning on Palpatine moment. Like, that's when Sansa gets Littlefinger.
We see her starting to work on Harry, as far as like Harry comes across pretty offensive. And instead of her being like afraid of it, she starts to play him and spin him around and make him feel dumb and manipulate him. So we can see that she's being written to being like, okay, she's getting older, she's starting to play the game or whatever. But it also makes me wonder if like maybe Harry's not totally a bad seed, and maybe they start to form a partnership that undermines Littlefinger's hold on her. So I'm very interested to see, because I grew up in an environment with a lot of psychological manipulation and control and stuff. So I'm really rooting for Sansa to like get out of this situation. But she's got to be the one to do it, even if other people help her come across and figure this out. Like, ultimately, she's got to reject what Petyr's trying to sell her. So
you say you grew up with a lot of psychological manipulation. Did you ever take the mantle where you were in the position to be able to psychologically manipulate people in your favor, even if it's just to get a job?
No, I have ADHD. I can only be like very straightforward and direct. It's painful, actually. I don't know if you picked up on that.
No, I haven't. I don't know. I don't make assumptions. That's why I just ask questions, because I don't know.
No, I grew up in a religious environment with a lot of double motives and fake smiles, and it the way that I responded to it is to be like very direct, and so that's the only response I could have to it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
But I really relate to Sansa being under the thumb of these people, and I can't wait to see her figure it out and pull the rug out. So yeah. I mean, I'm a super Gemini manipulator, but that makes me cherish people who are more straightforward. Well, to the point, I mean, that's why I like having you on, because you do bring a different perspective in many different ways than what I've got going on, and I think that makes the program better. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for being willing to argue sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And, I think people enjoy it.
It's fun.
I don't think people like it when we just agree and say the same thing. So,
and about Lysa, like, the reason I hate Lysa is because of the breastfeeding. I'm a human. I'm going to tell you guys. I'm going to tell you guys the real stuff. Like, because George wrote that, it just painted her in this horrible color where everything else she did was painted in that color of like, girl, what? So if we take the breastfeeding out, what we're left with is a story of unrequited love. And Shakespeare will tell you that's one of the best things to write about, only second to A Human Heart in Conflict. But, I have been that girl who's like, okay, the guy doesn't like me, but I like him. And my feelings have not gone away. What do I do with these feelings? I think that's the question, is that, like, you can love someone as much as you want, but if they don't love you, what do you do with these feelings? Do you ignore it and find hobbies and find another guy and find other stuff? Or what most of us do, what I did as a kid, is writing my diary about how he's meant to be with me. And yeah, he's dating the girl that looks better than me, but one day, the fates will make it arrange in some way for us to be together. And what happens is, for some of us, the fates never arrange it for us to be together because we're not meant to be together. So what do we as humans do? We make it so we end up together. I go to the same college that he goes to. I live on the same road that he lives in. And I don't think of it as stalking. I don't think of it as anything wrong. I think of it as me being in the right because I'm the one in love and I'm the one that the story is about. So I do want the audience to think of that when they think of Lysa. Don't think of her as the kid breastfeeding the 6-year-old.
Well, she's all of it, you know. I mean,
yeah.
But this is the thing that I really can relate to as far as Lysa's story, because I think all of us do this, especially when we're young, some of us still when we're old. You get a crush on somebody because they're attractive without really thinking, what would it look like if the two of us were like chilling at my house together? Would that make sense? Hanging out with, like, the two of us hanging out, like, can I see them giving me the things that I really want and saying the things that I want to hear? Like, oh, no, I could never get that person's attention. They're doing something else. Like, so, but you do that when you're young. You chase people and you try, like, if I'm just around them and if I dance good enough and, you know, make a good joke, like, yeah, I can convince, I'll get their attention and then they'll start liking me. And it's like, really, when someone likes you, you know, they look right at you and they smile and like, oh, what do you have to say? Tell me more. That person likes you. That's someone that you can have a thing going for.
There's been times where I like didn't think of that person. Like I never even knew their name, but someone told me that, oh, so-and-so likes you. And I'm like, oh, for real? And then I'm like, then you start liking that person because they like you. Not always.
Well, that would be, I would call that an example of you overlooked them and didn't really give them much of a fair shake, or you didn't pay them attention. Because there's a lot of people and you don't stop and picture yourself in a relationship with every person. But if someone tells you, oh, they have a crush on you, then you think, oh, well, they're not bad looking. Oh, they told me a joke that one time. Oh, maybe, yeah, it's flattering. When someone likes you, you're interested in that. And then you want to, like, oh, you consider them maybe differently. And
I also think the difference in the sexes is men kind of maybe want to sow their royal oats and spread their seeds. Whereas women, we're taught that, like, you have one love and you're supposed to, like, love one person. Like, whether it's the fairy tales or just what ends up happening naturally is that you feel like you have your one love and it's that original love when you were in freaking high school. And if you have other loves, then you're just a SLUT, you know?
Yeah, well, that's definitely something that, like, you can see that with Lysa is like, oh, I'm supposed to stay in love with this one person that I fell for when I was young. Yeah, that's definitely.
And it makes you a better person. That's the second part. It makes you a better person if you are able to realize that love.
Yeah, it's definitely a toxic relationship idea that's running around. And you mentioned it with Catelyn, too, in the way that she thinks about it. I just meant that, like, I can relate to this idea of, like, chasing someone because you want them. And for me, because I'm not a psycho, I stop and go, oh, I'm kind of doing that thing again. Like, I should really put my energy, you know, wait for somebody to actually give me energy back before I start getting all excited and building castles in my mind and all this stuff. So Lysa doesn't do that. She, like, sticks with it, you know. But I think all of us can relate to that idea of, like, wanting somebody and then doing dumb things, like you were said, like just kind of fooling yourself into thinking you can catch them. So
yeah. So her death is very funny to me. That's my first impulse, is to laugh at her falling through the moon door. But, you know, on second thoughts, like, damn, like, in her own story, she fucking lost. Imagine, this is your own story. This is your chapter, your book about things that are important to you. And at the end of it, the love of your life looks you in the face and says, nah, bitch, it was your sister. It was always your sister. And then you die. Like, that's so, what is sadder than that?
It's brutal. And then she doesn't even make a sound because it's just like,
yeah.
She's
shock.
so in,
and then
she's so in shock. And then the shove, she probably didn't even feel the shove when it happened.
No,
and I think it's important. This shows Littlefinger does get his hands dirty. Yes, he's not a martial lord, but he will push. Yeah. He will do the deed.
She was probably, like, already halfway to the ground before she even realized what happened in that moment. And then the next thing is just
realize it. She definitely died knowing that you were never number one. Imagine dying knowing that you were never number one in anyone's book. Even your dad liked Catelyn better. Your dad had Edmure because he was a son. Who were you important to,
Yeah,
Lysa?
like
No one.
Sansa's got to think about this. Be like, dude, he let Lysa believe that he was in love with her for years and then pushed her out the moon door. Like, yeah, she was obviously losing it and threatening you, and that's why she's okay with it in the moment because she feels rescued. But it's like if you just stand back and think about it, once you process it, it's like, wow, yeah, you
And then Lysa and Catelyn are very important because they are the learning bridges that, okay, if it wasn't for Lysa and Catelyn, Littlefinger wouldn't be so good at the game. He knows what the weaknesses of high lords and high ladies because he was able to practice this game at such a young age. Going back to the kissing game, the first time he kissed Catelyn and saw the look on Lysa's eye, that was the seed of him planting, how do I work this in my favor? And many other people, rich people like Robert Baratheon, they didn't have this type of training. This is a training that's unique to Littlefinger because of his experiences. Like being able to play people. Like as a woman, like I'm gonna admit, like breaking girl code. Yes, as women, we learn how to play men, how to get things. I knew a girl who was telling me, oh, this is how you get your nails paid for by a guy. Do X, Y, and Z. And was it bad? Yeah, but that's freaking life. It's part of becoming an adult. Learning that what are your tools at your disposal and how to play them to get what you want. And Littlefinger was playing that.
Well, closing thoughts, Tim?
I kind of checked out because like I've never had that problem. I mean, not to say that I'm like some social butterfly,
Wait,
but like,
what do you mean you've never had that? What problem?
like I've always been direct. If I had interest in someone, I asked them out. If they said no, I took rejection well and moved on. Like I'm not an incel. I mean,
Okay, but what about getting a job?
Like, I've never had these problems that you were discussing when it comes to like the idea of unrequited love, because I'm the type of like, okay, never mind. Next
Well, once
one.
again, Tim with the common sense,
on.
healthy answer. Correct. That is a correct answer,
Yeah.
Tim. That is right.
Tim, aren't you married? Wait, aren't you engaged?
In a once glorious past, I am what would have been just considered a normal guy. Like that's all I can say. Like typical run-of-the-mill guy. Like I'm not gonna stalk you. I'm not gonna take it to heart if I ask someone out and they say no. I'm not gonna be like going home and writing in my journal like that bitch, how come she doesn't see me? Doesn't she know that we'd be so good together? It's like, no, I've never had that issue.
Well, that's good, Tim.
You're different.
That is the way to do it. You should. If someone says they're not interested, you should move on and be normal about it. That's very correct. You should not start wars and bring down their family 17 years later and obsess over their daughter. And that's not the way to handle it. So thank you, Tim, for the counterpoint example.
But yeah, in matters of the heart, it's super complicated, and that's why I love this. Littlefinger, Lysa, Sansa. How much more tangled and complicated could you get? You're dealing with like 2 generations of trauma, and all of this, like I always say, is very applicable to our times. This is stuff that my girlfriends write me about, that I'm in groups about, that anonymous people write about. What do? I love this man. So I don't know. It's just.
They should be asking Grey Waste Tim. He's got the answers. So it's just like, move on.
But Tim, aren't you engaged?
Take no for an answer and move on.
But something worked for you. I'm not saying you manipulated your partner to being with you, but something worked for you, and everyone figures out what works for them.
Yeah, it's called
But
being a
life
genuine
is little-
person and then having chemistry with
okay.
another genuine person and establishing intimacy and mutual respect based on, that's, I mean,
Look, you want to
But how long did it take to find that person? When you're 16,
right.
you
Listen up, you nerds. Grey Waste Tim's going to tell you how to get a lady, okay? It's real simple. You ask them what their favorite dinosaur is, you feed them shrimp, and you watch the entire extended Lord of the Rings series with them, okay? That's all you have to do. That's how I did it.
Nice. I like that.
Cool. Well, if you have a very specific technique like that, you're likely to find the exact right person. I mean, there's only going to be a few people to thread that needle. So,
Yeah. Yeah. All that is, it just means waiting for the person that's right for you. But many of us at 16, we do not have the concept of time. We cannot wait for the person that's going to be in the future that's right for us. We try to make the puzzle fit by what we have.
Is that a reference? Is that from a movie or something, Tim? Or is that just something random that you said?
That's what he did, right,
No,
Tim? That's what he did.
That's something that legitimately won me a relationship, taking her out for shrimp and watching the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy.
That sounds like wholesome stuff to me.
Which is more, it's just basically saying find what they're into, and especially if it's something that you yourself are into, and share that. So for those who say like, oh, that's what I look for in a man, but not the shrimp. It's like, okay, well, yeah, before I make you dinner, I'm going to ask you, hey, are you allergic to any, is there any food allergies I should know
Tim,
about?
I don't like shrimp, so you better take me to a different kind of restaurant on our first date.
I like shrimp. I'm an island gal.
Well, you can go out with him then.
But what do you do when you're living in a civilization where marriages are arranged?
Not you don't do a lot. You just you know.
Don't. You kind of
because just going back.
So then you date. Hold on. Serious answer. You date the person you're betrothed to. Mm-hmm. That's what Kat and Ned did. Like they're like, okay, we're betrothed. Let's get to know each other. Let's form actual bonds of respect and intimacy and see what there is in each other to like and love, and they grew to love each other. So that's probably the best you can do with arranged marriages.
That's the best you could do. But also it forms that like any guy who's interested in you as a girl in these times, you think like, oh my God, it's destiny. It's Jonquil. Oh my gosh, this is, I feel like that's Lysa's mindset is that I know I'm supposed to be betrothed to a guy, but I'm so special and so awesome that this guy likes me now.
Well, you can see why the power of a fairy tale about true love would be so powerful in a society where most people don't have that choice. So that's why these legends live on and move people. Even if Petyr thought that he was Florian, like these legends have power because everything is so prescribed and controlled and stuff. So.
Yeah, the opposite. Oh, the girls with curly hair always want straight hair. The girls with straight hair always want curly hair, because that's just life. So it just goes to marriages too.
Really remember the shrimp, then bam, before you know it, married and pregnant. That's it. There's a step 2 in the middle, but the point is, find out what she likes and do fun things together. Okay, cool. So. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Great Ways Tim. Thanks, Girl Nettles. Thanks, chat.
It was fun.
Thank you. Love you guys. Cheers.